Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the May meeting of the Historic Preservation Board. We're so happy you all could join us, and we hope you all are staying healthy and happy and in good form. Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'd just like to advise the public of some information regarding the format of today's meeting, and following that, I'll read the city's notice regarding lobbyist registration. First of all, this virtual meeting of the Historic Preservation Board has been scheduled for the limited purpose of allowing applicants to obtain preliminary feedback from the board in order to further develop their plans. Each application you'll hear has been placed on the agenda for discussion purposes only. Each application on today's agenda will at all times be subject to a future, duly noticed quasi-judicial hearing at which full presentations will be made and the city's formal rules of procedure will apply. In other words, no formal approval may be granted at this virtual meeting. I'll be keeping time at today's meeting. Each applicant will have 10 minutes to present their application. Following the presentation, members of the public will be given 2 minutes each to speak. I'll be available throughout the meeting if any board members have any questions or any applicants or members of the public. Lastly, I'd like to read the city's notice regarding lobbyist registration. If you're appearing on behalf of a business, a corporation, or another person, you need to register as a lobbyist with the city clerk's office. If you haven't registered yet, you should register before you speak to the board. You don't have to register as a lobbyist if you're speaking only on behalf of yourself and not any other party, or if you're testifying as an expert witness, providing only scientific, technical, or other specialized information or testimony in this public meeting, or if you're appearing as a representative of a neighborhood association without any compensation or reimbursement for your appearance, to express support of or opposition to any item. Expert witnesses and representatives of neighborhood associations shall, prior to appearing, disclose in writing to the city clerk their name, address, and the principal on whose behalf they're communicating. If you're an architect, attorney, or employee representing an applicant or an objector, you must register as a lobbyist. These rules apply whether you're appearing in favor of or against an item, or encouraging or arguing against its passage, defeat, modification, or continuance. Thank you.
Okay, we guess we should move forward.
Mr. Chair, so let me just, for anyone from the public who has joined our meeting, we will be discussing two projects this morning. The first project is located at 1745 James Avenue. And then after we complete our discussion for that, we will be moving on to the Raleigh Hotel project, which is 1751 through 1775 Collins Avenue. So the first discussion is...
Come on, man, you got to, I see.
The first discussion will be HPB file 190354, 1745 James Avenue. When this is brought to you in a quasi-judicial setting, the applicant is going to be requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the total demolition of the existing structure and the construction of a new hotel building, including a variance to waive the required loading spaces. This is an interesting example of a contributing building listed within the Museum Local Historic District that once staff was able to really research and understand the building, we believe, and this is something we've talked to the board members previously about, that the current classification of contributing should probably be revisited. But in any event, staff is supportive of the demolition, and I'm just going to go through that briefly. So originally, this property consisted of two completely separate buildings, which were constructed at separate times on separate lots. So 1735 James Avenue was constructed in 1953, designed by Manfred Ungaro. 1745 James Avenue was constructed in 1951 and designed by Leonard Glasser. Both were designed within the post-war modern style. You can see in the applicant's historic resources report, they have submitted some documentation on the original buildings. Staff has also included some graphics in our staff analysis that show the existing building, which is really a product of a 1984 renovation. In 1984, the properties were physically connected and joined operationally, including a front addition and a new front facade that was, and then it's kind of like a 1980s Art Deco. So it's not an authentic Art Deco design. It was something that was done in the 80s to try to mimic the Art Deco style of architecture. Therefore, we have determined that it does satisfy the certificate of appropriateness criteria for demolition, and we are supportive of the demolition. We're also supportive of the design of the new hotel building, with some exceptions. And I know the applicant is going to present to you a plan, a rendering that takes some of staff's recommendations into consideration. So we had some concerns with regard to the fenestration, the design of the fenestration, as well as the projecting feature at the roof level, that canopy feature, which we thought was unnecessary and had the potential to overwhelm the surrounding historic district in terms of its scale. So when this is brought before you for a decision, staff will be recommending approval. The same with the variance. At this point, we do not believe that we have quite enough information with regarding to the operational plan and the loading plan. It's something that we're asking the applicant to work more with, both with the parking department and their operations, to understand better when and where the loading will be taking place. But we do believe this will be resolved once we get to hearing, and we're supportive of the project. And that is all I have, but I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you, Debbie.
So I think we're waiting now for the applicant to give a visual presentation. Do we have the applicant?
Good morning.
There we go.
And Debbie, I'll be setting the timer at 10 minutes, and I'll chime in and give a 2-minute warning before the end.
Before we start, I still don't see my architect, Louis Revuelta, on the. Is he there?
Thank you very much. Good morning to everybody. Yes, I was on mute.
Okay, perfect. I wanted to first, before we get into the PowerPoint, I wanted to do a brief introduction. My name is Alfredo Gonzalez on behalf of the property owner here today. And first of all, I appreciate the staff and the HPB board coming together and organizing this Zoom discussion item so we could start moving forward as we get over the pandemic and hopefully everyone is healthy. Debbie kind of outlined most of the issues I wasn't discussed, but in this case, this is, as Debbie mentioned, it's listed as a contributing building, but I think if you look at the historic research report, staff report, it outlines why this really should not be a contributing building and why we're proposing total demolition. In addition, I wanted to just touch upon the variance. The variance, we are requesting a loading zone variance, which is typical of most construction projects of the area because there's no street parking. And we'll continue to work with staff so they could achieve all the information they require to support the variance. So I can tell you that this site historically has had a very active hotel and restaurant and bar. So the new uses on the site will now be more a 90-room hotel with a very small restaurant, really as a breakfast, lunch, maybe some, light and fare, 460 square feet approximately in size. So it won't have that intense use that it did under the previous ownership. But anyway, we will work out with staff between now and the quasi-judicial hearing and address all staff's concerns. And with that, I'd like Louis Revuelta, our architect, to walk you through the PowerPoint. And then after public comment, Mr. Chair, if I could reserve some rebuttal of anything that's raised.
Sure.
Thank you.
Good morning. This is Luis Revuelta. Good morning, everybody. I will start with the roof plan or site plan. I'd like to mention that and I don't believe that it may be in this package, but the existing building, essentially, as it was described by Debbie, it's a Art Deco effort or to design that building in an Art Deco form. It has 5-foot setbacks on the north, the south, and the east. And if you go to sheet A100, you can see that, and it's got 10 foot on the front. We've been able to provide 15 feet on the front. We have 2 elements at the ground level that are 8 feet from the north and the south facades. They're very small, they're only 1 story. And then the rest of the project has either 15, 17 feet or 27 feet in the center. And then on the back, which is 5 feet currently, we have 15 feet. What you're looking at is the site plan, roof plan, in which we have amenities in the center of the structure, but in the structure itself is like an I, a capital I. It's narrow in the center, and then and that's where the 27-foot setback is provided, and then 17 feet on the west towards James, and 17 feet to the east. The next graphic is the ground level plan. In the ground level plan, we are proposing a very formal entry at the center. You'll enter a lobby, which is approximately 1,400 square feet. A small area, the lobby is about 500 square feet. There is a small area for snacks, continental breakfast. It's about 450 square feet. We try very hard to place the elevators in such a way that as you come in the lobby, the elevator lobby itself, it's on axis with the entrance, and it's on axis with a central internal courtyard with some water features. And that is also on axis with a corridor that starts taking you to the suites at the ground level. And at the end, we have the other fire stair, but that also, we're using that element and placing another water feature in the back as a focal point. So there's a very strong access and a sense of openness as you come into the hotel, all the way from the front to the back. And that is the progression. The center courtyard is partially covered, which you'll see on a section as I go through the rest of the plans. The next level is the second level. That would be sheet A102. As you can see, the lobby in the center is a 2-story lobby. And then you see the space that I was describing before, which is the courtyard, that essentially on the 3rd level, then it has the rest of suites that connected to the elevators. In here, what we essentially have is a bridge that we missed coloring. The next sheet, A103, shows you a typical level. Again, we felt that not only to create a sense of openness and views for the suites, but also for the neighbors, it was good to bring the building massing and make it as narrow as possible in the center, and then just have the units on the massing towards James and towards the east at the end, at either end of the building. And those are the setbacks that I described at the beginning. The next sheet is your roof plan, which is very similar to the site plan that you saw as the first exhibit. We have a small pool and amenity there, and sun decks towards the east at either side of the stairs. and the pool storage. And essentially, if we can go from here to the renderings, let's go to the sections, section A501. Here you can see a longitudinal section from west to east. The center portion is where we have the courtyard and the water features. We believe that is going to be a very pleasant area to sit. And some of it, I think, will be able to be perceived from the sidewalk, because I think given the fact that we put everything on a central axis, you'll be able to perceive some sort of lighting at the end of the elevator lobby, which not only during the daytime, but at nighttime, I think is going to be very elegant.
You have 2 minutes remaining.
And then section 502 shows you a transversal section of that courtyard, and you can see the relationship to the massing and the property lines. The next and last exhibit is for Jack. It's a line of sight. This is not an addition, but I felt Jack was going to ask me for it. So Jack, there you go.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome, sir. And as you can see, given the parapet that we are providing, you'll never be able to see any of the small compressors that are going to be placed in that area facing west. And if we can close then with the rendering, which is the second rendering, which is a view from the street. Staff had mentioned that we reduced the trellis on top, and we did that substantially. The street level would be, I think, my preference, which is the first rendering. I'm sorry, there you go. And we had made a mistake on some eyebrows that were only covering part of the glazing sliding doors, and we did not mean to do that. So it was a good pickup by staff, and we changed that. So I believe that we have addressed all of the issues to our knowledge that were concerned. So with that, I'm open for any questions you guys might have.
Well, thank you, Luis, and thank you, Alfredo. It's so nice to see you looking so well, and greatly appreciate your presentation and your coming today.
Thank you, sir. Same to you.
Mr.
Debbie?
Chair, if you'd like to open the public hearing, I'll set my clock at 2 minutes a speaker.
Nick, before we open the public hearing, I just wanted to advise the board that we did receive public comment from the condominium located at 1750 James Avenue. That public comment had been forwarded via email to all of the board members. That is also placed in the public comment record file. I'm not sure if they're going to speak today, but we have received their comments.
And also there was another one which came electronically, at least to me, a resident.
I'm not sure if I have that one, Jack. So do you recall what the address was of that particular property?
I have it here. Yes. It was from a Marissa Bayescu, and she's a neighbor at it didn't have her address, but I have it printed in front of me.
Okay, that's fine, Jack. If you could forward that to staff so that we can also include that in our public comment file. And
Okay.
other than that, I think it is a good time to open it to the public, and then we can take board member questions and comments. So if any members of the public have raised their hands, I think we have two. The first one is Daniel Seraldo. So I think we could hear from Daniel at this point. And Nick does have the timer Daniel,
Thank you,
if
Debbie.
you need additional time, please let the chairperson know, but we are going to start you with the 2 minutes.
Thank you, Debbie and everybody. I hope you're all well and safe. I do want to just mention for the public watching that MDPL has made every effort to allow public full participation, just like the applicants and the developers via video and presentation. Those efforts are ongoing. Unfortunately, now, as you can see, we're only able to comment telephonically. Miami Beach is a city which looks the way it does because of active public participation. So we will continue pushing for that equal access.
Okay.
As far as the sanctuary proposal, we do agree with the staff that the existing structure is not historic or architecturally significant because of prior modifications. And as far as the overall design, we did have a thorough review with the applicants and our advocacy committee last week, and we are in support of the overall new design. We do encourage exploration of different balcony treatment options other than glass, but other than that, we are supportive of the overall design. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
Thank you, Daniel. We do have one more member of the public, Roger Goldblatt, who would like to speak.
Yes, thank you very much. I live right across the street in 1750 James Avenue, and I represent our residents, our owners here. I'm actually in direct sightline. We're concerned about many issues. One being the additional noise, the congestion, the street traffic. James Avenue is a very narrow street. As it is now, we have certain times, we have a nursery school at the Temple that holds up traffic in the morning when children are being dropped off, then about 2, 3 in the afternoon when they're being picked up. We have construction in the corner, 1775 James Avenue, that their trucks, their construction vehicles have been blocking traffic, and it's pretty much a nightmare. James Avenue is a lovely street. It's a beautiful street. It's a little sanctuary. I don't know how they named 1745 that name, but it is a sanctuary. Our building and all the other buildings have been here since the early 70s. When James Avenue, if there was a hotel, they were never higher than 2 stories. I understand there's a variance. The one at the corner is going to be 5 stories. The one we're talking about is also going to be 5 stories, but apparently there's a way to get around it by the top edifices, the towers, which actually add about 2 more stories in our sightline. This concerns us greatly. There's also a problem with noise carrying from rooftops. Sometimes you can't hear it in the street, but we hear it in our apartments constantly. At the corner, there's a hotel with a rooftop bar. We're constantly calling the police on that. And we're easygoing people, actually. So we're also concerned.
Sir, your 2 minutes are up.
Oh, okay. Thank you very much. I appreciate it.
He can continue.
I can.
Would you like me to set, Mr. Chair, would you like me to set another minute?
Yes, I'm very interested in what he has to say.
Okay, sure.
Thank you, and I'll try to talk really, really fast. We're also very concerned about the security. We have a lot of older people. A lot of people in our building have been here. They inherited the building from their parents who bought it originally in the 70s. And most of these buildings that we're talking about used to be residence apartments as well. So the idea of more traffic, more strangers coming into our neighborhood, a lot of cars dropping people off, plus the concept that there's no parking for these hotels, there's no loading, it really, really concerns us. Plus, just on a personal note, and I'll talk really super fast, is so many of these buildings they're beautiful, they really are, but we have to have concern for the people, for the residents. We're here through storms, through viruses, through whatever. So our needs should be taken into consideration perhaps just as equally or even more so than some developers, we care about the city. We care about everything here, and it's our home. So thank you for hearing me out. Thank you for hearing our voices, and we're always available for questions. Thank you.
Thank you. That was a superb presentation. I understand your points, and it's great to have public participation, and we thank you very much. Nick.
Yes, I believe the applicant had asked for a couple minutes after the public hearing. I don't see anyone else in the queue to speak from the public. The only thing I would like to add is if there's a member of the public who's called in by phone and they're trying to speak, you can raise your hand by dialing #9.
Okay. Do we have to have disclosures?
Since this is not the formal publicly noticed quasi-judicial hearing, I've not been asking for disclosures. I've also not been swearing in witnesses. The city's formal rules of procedure would apply once we're back in a setting where we can fully and fairly conduct a quasi-judicial hearing as we normally would. Now, that said, if an individual board member would like to bring up an ex parte communication because it may be relevant to the discussion or because it may inform your comments, you can feel free to do so. But no, this is not the formal quasi-judicial public hearing.
Okay, thank you. So now we discuss it amongst ourselves?
Well, I think the applicant had asked for a couple minutes.
Oh, okay.
Alfredo, would you still like a few minutes?
I think Nancy wants to say something.
Yes. Hello.
If before you speak, Nancy, if I could just, so we do have callers on the line, and I just want to clarify, it's *9.
I'm
So
sorry.
it's not
Sorry about that. *9.
*9. It's *9. If you want to raise your hand to give public comments, *9 on your telephone. Okay. Thank you. I'll turn it back over to you, Nancy.
Unless you want to hear the rest of what there's people in the audience who are calling in, or you want to hear.
I think that would be best.
I don't see anyone with their hand up. So were we going to go back to Luis Revolta?
No, Alfredo. Actually, I was
Alfredo. Okay.
If possible.
Are there other callers?
There are no callers with their hands raised. So we do have other callers listening, but at this point, they have not requested to comment.
Okay. Then, shall I start for the board?
Well, doesn't Luis want to say something?
No. Alfredo wanted to have a quick rebuttal to the public comment, if possible, and then we'll answer any questions the board has as you go through the board question.
Is that all right, Nick?
Yeah, Alfredo, I'll give you 2 minutes.
So you know. Just wanted to clarify for the record, from the public comment, we're not asking for any height variance. This area is zoned 5 stories. So there was a reference by one of the speakers that there was a variance. There is no variance. This is a 5-story, what's permitted in the RM2. Also, just to note, and we're happy to work with the Condo Association 1750 James and meet with them. The 5-story shouldn't be an issue since they're an 11-story building. And quite frankly, this site has been for over 20 years a hotel. It was originally built as sanctuary in the early 2000s, where it had a 32 room hotel, had an approximately 80-seat restaurant, destination restaurant with a bar component and a liquor license till 5 a.m., which is completely opposite of what we're proposing. These hotels have 90 rooms. They don't have any active F&B other than to service the hotel clients. And the impact to the neighborhood should be minimal because as this hotel with the other properties as part of the group, they do a lot of shuttle service. So most of their clients arrive without a car or are not renting cars. They're being shuttled from the airport or how they arrived in South Florida.
Okay,
That's
thank
my
you.
comments.
Thank you. Luis, do you want to say anything?
No, just nice seeing you guys.
Okay, thank you. Debbie?
Chair, at this time, if the board would like to deliberate, I mean, one of the ways we can do this is you can call on each board member one by one. If you think that would be a more structured way to begin the discussion, that's up to you.
Yes. I assume all the board members would like to make some comments. So I will go down the list as I have it in front of me, which first would be Nancy.
Okay. First of all, I have a big white square in front of everybody's face. Is that something that has to be there? Does anybody else have the white square? It says only the host can share the meeting.
BJ?
Hi, Nancy. I think you're fine. I wouldn't click on that message, but we can
No.
see you on camera. And we can hear you perfectly fine. So I think you're fine to just go ahead and issue
The
some
problem
comments.
is that I cannot see most. It goes all across the screen and hides the building as it's being discussed. But I don't want to stop the meeting to do it. If somebody, Jessica, can figure out how to get rid of it, fine. Otherwise, there's no way to see it. But I have questions that I must. Did I hear correctly? Who am I speaking to, by the way? Debbie or Roberta?
Nancy, we're all on, so you can address your comments or questions to me,
Okay.
or to the applicant.
Okay, so I'm wondering, did I hear correctly that this is an 11-story building? Is that what's on the screen?
No,
11
this is Alfredo, Nancy. It is
Go
a
ahead.
5-story building. I was just referencing the public comments came from across the street, an 11-story building. That's all.
Oh, the comments came from an 11-story building, but this is a 5-story building.
Yes.
Okay. I am just concerned about the fact that we're taking 2 or 1, whatever it is now, historic buildings, and we're demolishing them. And I have no way to see what is supposed to be built there, if it's going to have any reference as a historic building on James Avenue. Now, James Avenue for years has been a wonderful street until the new structures started to develop. I know that there's a big garage on the south part of the street. That must be the one that was referenced by the speaker. But I don't understand what the idea of preservation has become. It seemed to me when I first started with all of this, long before the HP board, that the idea of preservation was to enhance existing historic buildings best we can. And it's not to just bury them in more height, more concrete. In this case, I am understanding that there is no height increase and that the height of 5 stories is allowed. Is that correct?
Yes, Nancy.
Okay. My understanding of preservation is that it's not just to save what is required by law. There are laws that you have to. In this case, the laws or the ideas behind the preservation movement is to design an addition, if you have to have more room, to design an addition to enhance the historic quality of the building. In other circles, the fact that these are two designated historic buildings, the people would not look at them as a blank site to go build another modern building or whatever is going to be built there. The idea is to utilize the parts of it that were historic. We have no discussion about what was historic on the building. I can't even read it, and it's difficult doing it this way. So I'd like someone, I guess it would be Revolta, to justify the plan. How does it recognize that there was a historic building there at one time? In some circles, people will require that you replicate or come back with the historic building and do something. So I don't understand what this is. It's just throwing away what we call historic and starting all over and rebuilding a building that is hard to identify whether it fits into the block. The block used to be a very interesting 2 blocks of historic buildings, and little by little, they're gathering away. As far as the comments made by the person who's representing Robert Goldblatt, as far as his comments, I think that we need to really address all of those before we hurry up and make it sound like this is the building of the future.
Hello, Nancy. This is Alfredo. I think that I could respond to.
I'd like to hear from Revolta, since he's the one who designed it, I guess. How does it show us that this was historic buildings? Are there any elements that tell us where it came from? Or is there any intention to do that?
Is there the ability to bring a photograph of this existing building right now? Can the city?
I saw, no, we have the plan. I saw what it looks like. It's been embellished. That should never have been. I'm talking about the original building before this 1983.
Alfredo, I don't believe that we have. I don't know if Arthur.
Yeah, I could
have that. I don't have that.
Louis, I could respond to that. Nancy, what happened was that these were 2 separate 2-story.
No, I read the whole thing. My comments are after reading and seeing what I could with the volumes that you sent us.
Sorry.
I'm just trying to add, I'm trying to talk about the things that are missing as far as I'm concerned from the presentation.
Okay.
And I know you're going to be back again. So maybe it would be a good idea if you listen to the neighbors. Don't just write it off as, yeah, we'll take care of the neighbors. And to show how this new building that's going to be built recognizes that it was a historic building. What are the elements to tell us that?
Alfredo, I can give it a shot, but Nancy, unfortunately, I do not have much information about the 2 original buildings. There were 2 original buildings that in the 1960s, they were joined together.
1980s.
And, I'm sorry? And as you can see in the package, what the building from the 1960s or 70s tried to do was actually to replicate Art Deco. As you probably know, if I showed up and presented a replication of an Art Deco solution, I would probably be kicked out of the meeting for attempting to do that. So I believe that our design has elements that are typical, that are to some way paying a tribute to Art Deco architecture and to the context of many small buildings in Miami Beach. We have the typical eyebrows. We have, I believe, a well-executed entrance and progression through the lobby, elevator lobby, into an interior courtyard. And I think some of those are elements that can be tied into context, existing context. I think that the fact that we made an effort, along with our client, to try to make the building very narrow in the center and be away from the neighbors. The prior buildings, granted, there were 2 stories, but they were 5 feet from the property line. We are anywhere between 27 and 17 feet, and we're only 8 feet. And we have 2 elements at the ground level that are 1 story. And other than that, our building sets back itself from the James Avenue, goes back 15 feet instead of 10, in some places more than that. In the back is 15 feet, not 5. And I believe that the building sits well within the context of the street. So that's the best I can do to tell you that we tried the best we could to have a sensitive thing.
I agree. I know that you have. I know you always have. I would just like to see some of that the next time you return to show us as the development starts. You know, I'm just afraid that all of a sudden this go whizzing through and the building will be demolished. And I'd like to see how it connects with the existing, not the existing, the original building. That tells you its beginnings.
Okay, we'll bring that to the official presentation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Thank you, Louise.
Mr. Chair, if I could just, we do have Arthur Marcus with his hand up. Arthur Marcus, I believe, prepared the applicant's historic resources report. Would you like to hear from Mr. Marcus?
Certainly.
Okay, Arthur, you can give your comments.
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Good morning. One of the comments I just wanted to address to Nancy is that if you look on the front cover of the historic report, you will see what we were able to find, 1 picture and 1 architectural drawing of what the original MIMO buildings were. The original ones were MIMO, and then when the sanctuary came about, the architect and developer decided to do a neo-deco style. So I just wanted to correct that.
Oh, thank you, Arthur. Debbie, I'd like to make a comment because if I don't mind, I should come last, I realize, but if I don't add this at this point, I'm afraid it will get lost and out of context. I have many comments to make, which I won't make now, but one I would like to make if I can. This raises to me a very important question, not related necessarily directly to the building that was built originally or what we see today or to Luis's new building. The issue here is what might we be preserving as opposed to redeveloping. The issue is that I've been told, I can't verify it, I've not seen it, but I have been told that the current building with its neo-Art Deco or post-Art Deco, whatever you want to call it, facade, is very similar in many ways to some buildings that do exist in Miami Beach, especially the Citibank building across from the temple, which has now sadly been destroyed. The question here is, are these buildings in and of themselves worth preserving? It's a question that faces all preservationists everywhere. This 1980s neo-deco building is now 36 years old. And there are examples of it around. And the question is, should we be concerned or preserving examples of it as an historic issue? I do believe that this building was awarded a prize by MDPL in 1984, I believe it was. Mr. Galbert received the award for this building as a notable example of a renovation or rehabilitation. If that meant anything originally, does it mean anything now? As Nancy says, should we just throw it out with the dishwater because it's not maybe a favored style today? That's a question that I would like the board to think about, not necessarily today, but between today and the time that it's formally presented. I think Mr. Revolta's building is really fabulous. I think it really speaks very well to itself. But remembering that a lot of these buildings were based on interior courtyard space, as Kirk has reminded us many times. This is another example of the historicity of an idea of a floor plan is being thrown out for a 2020 example of what good architecture is. And Mr. Revolta's architecture is always very good. It is really superb. But my question is to think about, while other people are speaking, is this what we want to replace historic contributing buildings with in future? Buildings that do no longer focus on a courtyard or original design of buildings, but now compress the building into one mass, leaving property around it. It's the absolute reverse of what has been. That, to me, in itself is not historic preservation. This is just a redevelopment. And is this right or wrong? The board can discuss this at will. Thank you. Sorry to go on, but I thought I shouldn't let the fact that it was an award-winning building when it was built get lost in the shuffle. I just don't think it should be thrown out with the bathwater. Thank you. The next person would be Kirk.
Hey there. Just a few comments. So, first of all, you know, these two original buildings designed by Ungaro and Glasser, to me, even though Glasser and Ungaro were not most prolific artists or architects in Miami Beach, I would say for sure that they fall in mid-century modernism on Miami Beach in my top 10 most innovative and exciting. And so it's a shame, first off, that you know, whatever happened in 84 happened in 84. It's also a shame that, you know, we have one photograph of the building on James Avenue and 1735, and we don't even have that for 1745. We have nothing. At the same time, I mean, just off of the top of my head, I can think of so many exciting architectural contributions that those two architects brought to Miami Beach. So, you know, I think it's very well appreciated what the point that Nancy was making. I also appreciate that that we don't really have much in the way of to substantiate much detail in what those original buildings looked like, even if we wanted to. At the same time, I can't help but wish that maybe, you know, I know that there's mid-century modern inspired elements within the design, but I can't help but wish that we tried from a modern perspective to maybe pay a little bit more homage, particularly to Glasser, because I think with the entranceway of the new design and the, you know, the soaring glass entryway, I think, you know, that was actually a typical design feature for Ungaro. Although if it were Ungaro, I would think that it would have been offset. At the same time, and going back to what Daniel Seraldo from MDPL's comments were, and I'm not sure if Arthur Marcus is still on the line, But I think some of the greatest features of Glasser's buildings are the way that the masonry awnings would wrap the buildings and come down at a 45-degree angle. And it seems like perhaps, you know, if we're working with the treatment on the balconies and how they wrap around, maybe those could be done in a little bit more of an interesting way, and maybe look at Glasser and some of the works he's done across the city to inspire it, not to recreate it. And that also ties into my next feelings about the design, which I'm really having a hard time with the vertical feature in the center. I guess it's perforated metal cladding that goes up the center of the structure. Is that correct, Luis? I can't hear you there. I think you're muted.
I am showing unmuted. Can everybody hear me?
I can hear you.
Yeah. Yeah, it's framing the entrance, Kirk.
The cladding that goes up the entire center of the building, that's perforated metal, correct?
Yes.
Okay. I personally wish, and I think that this building would fit better within the context that it is, if it had more horizontal orientation and not vertical. To me, the vertical shouts out a little bit too much in context and says, look at me, when it doesn't need to. And I'm not sure. To me, you know, the balconies obviously go horizontal, and I'm not sure what that perforated vertical feature, what it contributes, except for calling more attention to the building. And I'm not sure, you know, to me, that's feels a little bit in competition to fitting compatibly with the neighborhood. Again, I wish we could put, you know, on the facade treatment, on the balcony treatment, a little bit more horizontal emphasis and less vertical, if that makes sense. Please.
I am trying to raise my hand, but I don't.
You're still on.
Okay. I was just corrected by my staff because we discussed both metal and stucco, and what you should have in front of you ended up being stucco, not perforated metal. So it is stucco, and we can certainly work with staff to try to introduce some horizontal. We've done this before in other projects to see how we can enhance the horizontals and decrease the accent on the verticals.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that the building to the north is more of an Art Deco building. I'm not sure the period of that one, but it seems to me, for sure, the mid-century modern focus of the original buildings would have been, and they are in the pictures, more horizontally oriented. And you know, I would also hope to maybe lean on Arthur Marcus here, because I think you could probably describe those specific wraparound features and some of those innovative components that Leonard Glasser brought to the architecture of Miami Beach. I think, you know, in terms of the massing, specifically on the front, and I think it's important what Jack mentioned as well about the side courtyards. At the same time, you know, these are facing to the south rather than ignoring it, and to the north, and I think that's good. It's a middle ground, but I really would like to see a little bit more inspiration. The other thing is, I believe Ungaro worked with natural stone more so than, you know, like a metal cladding, which you've clarified is no longer metal cladding. But I really would think it would be a nice feature if you could bring in a little bit more inspiration from those architects, because their work really is so ahead of its time and exciting, I think, for Miami Beach. So that's my comment on that part. In terms of the active use, I mean, that's a planning component. I appreciate everything that Mr. Goldblatt brought to the discussion. I'm not sure, again, you know, we go over this again and again. In terms of the design, I'm not sure, you know, how what we're doing and looking at contributes to active use. It's more of a planning board dialogue, from my understanding. The parking, since the resident, Mr. Goldblatt, brought it up, and I'm happy that he did, it's concerning to me. I understand when you are adding on to an existing and saving an existing contributing building. I also understand that maybe it provides more design opportunities to not put parking within the design. At the same time, you know, it's challenging to see, and it's worrisome to me, the idea that you could potentially put more stress on buildings within a particular neighborhood that are contributing, that do not have existing parking, by not designing or relieving that within that building. So I'm you know, I'm on the fence with that one. I'm not sure I understand why it could not be, although I do get that it would create an additional design challenge. But again, with that in mind, and with the work of Ungaro, as I mentioned, if the entrance was set offset, the building was a little bit more horizontally oriented, which offsetting the entrance would contribute to. I'm not sure that would create as much of a design problem. It might in terms of the massing and the way that the interior spaces are distributed. Lastly, I want to just touch on, and this is more of a general statement, but the landscaping. There's such a limited palette of native plants, and it brings me to a larger discussion that I just want to mention for the record, because it seems like between, you know, sable palms and gumbo limbos and stoppers, that's mostly what we get. And this is not for the applicant per se, but I mean, I know that there's so much more of a palette of wind-strong native plants. My understanding from a landscaping perspective, and Max would probably be more of an expert on this than me, but plant diversity is good. And the more projects we see with gumbo limbos as the predominant tree, the more I question it, because I think that we do have opportunities to bring in a lot of particularly amazing natives that are wind strong, that would work in a lot of different locations, and that would add a lot to projects, not just relying on the same 3 types of trees. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. Very, very, very thoughtful.
Jack, I was wondering if I could.
Sure.
I could clarify one thing, if possible.
Sure.
I just wanted to clarify. I know it's been mentioned a couple of times. There is no historic internal courtyard. Until the 80s, these were 2 separate buildings with side courtyards that happened to face each other. But there were 2 independent properties. That's what originally they were. The courtyard you see today in the plans, that was added by combining the 2 sites in the 80s. And I just wanted to note that in this district, there is no parking requirements, and the traffic analysis that was done for this site has a minimal change in traffic patterns. This site has been an active hotel destination restaurant in the past. So it's not a completely new use.
Okay, thank you very much for that clarification. Next, Matt.
Was that me?
Max, yeah.
Hey, good morning. I cut out there for the getting called to the floor. The presentation touched on this, and my attention was also on the loading zone variance, and I'm supportive of not having parking on site, but I did want to understand, and when this comes back, given that we have that traffic study, but going into a little bit more on the practicality, I think the presentation alluded to, my concern was with an increase in the number of rooms, kind of what that does to the intensity of people coming and going, but it sounds like a decreasing emphasis on the restaurant or bar was factoring into that as well. But I think there's still a question of how this plays out practically, given the other uses on the block, and how it can continue to function without being too disruptive, while also generally supportive of not having the parking. To the point about the landscaping, that caught my eye as well, but it might be more of a city staff directed question. I was looking at the language of the order that was included in the analysis, and there's reference to recommendation for a revised landscape plan that's also addressing the irrigation system, and I would maybe add to that stormwater management. But I didn't really see mention in the staff analysis or the presentation so far much about the landscape plan, or whether there's any sort of on-site stormwater management related to the landscape features. You know, I can see there's a reliance on planters, but if there's any sort of opportunity that you considered for using the landscape plan for stormwater management as well. And those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Rick.
Hi, good morning. As to the question of preserving the existing building, I think it's curious. We see this building from the 1980s, and perhaps today, 30 plus years later, public sentiment doesn't really see the need to preserve it. But of course, public opinion changes over time. There are buildings from the 70s that I would never think we would want to preserve, but we surprise each other. But right now, I think that what they're proposing is appropriate, in part because it fulfills the demands of the zoning code. And I think that the public's concerns about the proposal really stem from what is allowed in the zoning code. The residents' concerns are, you might say that it's a largely residential street, but as it's been presented, there are other hotels around there. And I think if there's an issue to be raised, it's with what is allowed. As to the impact, 90 hotel rooms, it would be, I think, helpful to see in the site plan depicted how it is that loading and unloading will happen at the front of the street, how it is that trash will be disposed of. It would be good to have a kind of graphic to describe the movements in and out of the site. If this were a site that had an alley, like many other blocks in Miami Beach do, it would be, I think, much better, but it's a reality that, we have to deal with. And so, short of inserting a lane for deliveries on one of the two sides, I just think that we need to, perhaps, hear from the architect or in the next round of drawings, visualize all of that movement. I appreciate the open space that is being created inside the property. I think that there is a kind of parallel between the existing courtyard, which we see in our package here, is actually a very familiar type of Miami Beach space, because we often see these two types of side yard buildings joined to create a courtyard. So I appreciate that. It would also be nice to see what the character of that new space would be like. And as much as I want the concerns of the neighbors to be addressed, I don't know that it's in our hands here. I think it's in the hands of the zoning code. Those are my comments.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Next, Scott.
Yeah. On the demolition, we've, at least in my years on the board, we've seen a lot of demolition requests. And there's one thing that we always seem to always ask for, and that's either to keep a portion of the existing building, even if it's not considered, one of the top, like, historical gems in the city, or at least on the new construction to really try to incorporate some of the features of the existing building on the new construction. And we've heard that this one doesn't, it could go a long ways, could go a lot further in doing that. But it's just something that I think the rest of the board members should consider, just the overall demolition of the building. I wouldn't be totally opposed to that, considering all the changes that went through, that the building's gone through, and all the additions and things that were done with it. But, you know, I'd love to see a portion of it remain. I mean, we can do a little more research and find out exactly what those buildings look like and possibly keep a portion or really incorporate some of that into the new building. It's just something, as far as demolition is concerned, to think about for the applicant moving forward. I have a bigger concern with the overall massing of the building. You know, that stretch of James Avenue, the 1700 block, this building seems like it's going, or it will stand out. All the massing, or at least it seems like a majority of the massing of that building is pushed toward James Avenue. I understand why the applicant's doing that, because, you know, in order to have that green space in the middle, he needs to push the massing out. And yes, that's good for the building and the people who are going to be, you know, on the property, but it's not good for the rest of the neighborhood. You have basically a 5, or maybe, you know, when you consider the mechanical room and everything else on the roof, maybe a 6-story building right on James Avenue. There are no other buildings like that on the 1700 block of James Avenue. There's the one building toward 18th Street that's being renovated, and there's more height going there. But if I'm not mistaken, that's pushed toward the rear of the lot. So it just seems like the massing is sort of not geared, but designed in a way to benefit the building much more than the rest of the neighborhood, or at least that stretch of James Avenue. I do think that building's going to stand out quite a bit if that front, I guess it's the west elevation, remains as it is. I know the city in their staff recommendation is to remove the canopy up there, but I don't really think that's going to do much toward at least mitigating my concern. I'm not sure what it is, other than maybe taking away maybe that top level, or just moving it back a little bit, setting it back. It just seems like they're putting it up there in order to benefit the building and not the neighborhood by providing that amenity to the building. But there's a problem with that when you consider what it does to the street there in the neighborhood. So that's my concern. I mean, I'm much more concerned about that than the demolition that's proposed. But that's something that I think the applicant should really look at and really consider when this eventually does come back to us, because that's something that's going to, at least the massing is something that's going to really play into how I vote on this.
Scott, it's Alfredo. I just wanted to thank you for your comments. And I wanted to just kind of, in the plans, it's not in the PowerPoint, but in the package that you do have, you'll see the area. This building is actually immediately abutting to the south, a 4-story building. And right across the street on the 1700 block, you have an existing 11 and 7-story building. So there are buildings of greater height and equal height in this 1 block area. And this doesn't even talk about I don't know what's being proposed at the temple across the street as far as school additions. I also wanted to reference, and I understand that in this project, there's a lot of discussion about the total demolition. This building was never reviewed when it was under the Museum Historic District back in 1990. It was classified a non-historic conforming building. It only became automatically contributing when the city administration and the city commission abolished that middle category. Districts used to have 3 categories: contributing, non-historic, conforming building, and non-contributing. In 94, they changed the middle and eliminated the middle category, and anything that was in that middle category automatically fell as a contributing building. And so I just wanted to, and I understand that typically if you have a contributing building, the front facade is what is this board, staff, and everyone understands is what they look to preserve, the main component they look to preserve. These 1980s renovations went completely against the Secretary of Interior standards for rehabilitation. I mean, it totally obliterated the front facade, demolished it, and created a lobby and a new front facade where none had never existed. So I just wanted to point that out for the record.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfredo. Next is Barry.
Yes, thank you. I have a few comments. And I heard Nancy loud and clear and others. And I would say, and maybe I see it, where the architect is referencing the original buildings, where the original buildings have these stucco frames, these vertical and horizontal bars. I see that around the entrance. I see it with the eyebrows. I see it with that canopy that the city doesn't really prefer, but I actually do. But I also agree that the building could use a bit more reference to the original architecture. Not so much this 1980s conglomeration of trying to be hip and combine two buildings. I think if anything, maybe this 1980s award that you referenced from MDPL was done provided in a sense for helping the street in a planning sense. I don't see it ever as being an architectural sense. So in that, I do not have an issue with the total demolition of the building. I appreciate the references of these stucco frames. I think the building could use them more. In reference to, I don't have an issue with the height of the building. I do have somewhat of an issue with the kind of the squattiness of the massing. And I think the massing could be improved with a bit more articulation. I do appreciate the setbacks of the building being increased. I do appreciate that center courtyard with the bridge going across. Where else did I have some? I don't have so much of an issue with the glass balconies. I find that they lighten up the building. Possibly, so it may be an area for increased articulation and references to the original architecture, but that's pretty much it. And I don't see it as the biggest guy on the block. By far, like it's been referenced 3-4 times. There's an 11-story building across the street. And maybe they don't want to look down on it. I'm not going to take issue with the residents across the street. But I think that's my only concern is increased reference to the original architecture, which we have in these two pictures on Arthur's report. And some, the question I did have was the loading. I'm not so concerned about the trash coming out the side. That can be done. But am I to understand that the applicant does not want to take up a parking space with a loading zone? Is that the issue there? The lawyer, can you?
Sorry, I was muting. I apologize. Mr. Klein, no, what we're saying with the loading, because it's new construction, it requires providing loading spaces in the property. Since we're not, the overall character of the neighborhood is not to have the curb cut and provide parking, we're asking for the variance on loading. Now, historically for the site, since we did have for 20 years an operating hotel and restaurant till 5 a.m., there are valet drop-offs that could also be used if the parking department allows for partial loading. In the area, we've talked to the parking department. They have designated on side streets loading areas for the neighboring hotels. So we need to work with the parking department and staff and determine if it's going to be a combination of some loading happening in front where the valet's drop-offs are, and then using the city designated areas as well. So, but we will work with staff and have that plan from when we come back to a part of judicial hearing. But,
Okay.
we'll address
I'm okay with that. I'm okay with that. And I mean, I've traveled around a lot and have no issue with the no parking issue. But I would say, and it's a perfect example, the image right behind you of our new proposed building and the building just to the north. I see more articulation on that building to the north. And that massing is broken up a bit and not as squat. And that's what I would like to see, as opposed to just the vertical element of the entrance. Here I am on the entrance. Some increased articulation, breaking up that massing for the height of it. And those are my comments. I look forward to seeing it. I think it's going to be a great addition to the neighborhood.
Okay, thank you, Barry. Have I missed anybody other than myself? Okay, my turn. Okay, I'd like to make some comments about the building itself. Again, I think the proposed building is really quite nice in and of itself, but I don't think that the massing and, as Kirk says, what's going on in the front of the building, frankly, goes with that block. I know reference has been made to the 11-story building across the street. That's all well and good, but I'm talking about the block that this building is on. If you look on page A006 of your drawings, that block, with just one exception on the other corner, is basically everything on it is the same height. The building that Alfredo keeps referencing, I think, is the building next door, which is the Lee condominium, I think it's called.
Lily Manor condo, yes.
Yeah, which is called 4 stories. The massing of it, though, to me appears to be, I see it behind you, Alfredo. It's not quite as tall as the building you're proposing, and the buildings to the north of this proposed site are similar to the building that's there now, which is 2.5 stories. I think that, let alone what the zoning may allow you to do, I always believe less is more. And if you build this building, to me, it's an open invitation to other people on that block to follow suit and destroy the entire nature of that block. You're going to be making the whole block open to medium high-rise architecture similar to what you're proposing. You know, it's, as Nancy keeps saying, it's chipping away at what is and what is appropriate. That block is basically a unity as it is now, possibly with the exception of the building next door. And I just in my mind, I need to know where this ends. When we go down this slippery slope, does that mean everything on this block eventually is going to be as high as your building, which is frankly not 5 stories tall? With the roof accoutrement, it is higher than that. And I think the front loading of it is too much. I have a problem with the whole thing. This is a similar problem that we've had with some designs in the past that we've worked with Luis on, and I still have that problem. I think just because someone has the right to do something, with our review should be strong enough that we try to keep the nature of the historic district alive. And I think that if this will be used as an example later on for justification for other people on the block to do the same thing. And I think the massing in the front is just too much. The fact that there's an 11-story building across the street, that's on another block. That block has a different scale. And I need to look at your environment, which to me is your block. And it's too big for my taste. and for what I think is appropriate. If you look on the drawing A006, your building, I did all the buildings in pink magic marker. Your building I did in yellow. And it is considerably higher, if your drawing is accurate on that page. It's considerably higher by what appears to me to be almost 3 stories than everything else around it. And again, it's an example of what's appropriate. The scale, everything goes back to scale. The scale of the neighborhood, the scale of the buildings around it. I'm really perplexed and have a real problem with it the way it's proposed, basically by definition. Personally, if the building that exists there now could be restored, as it were, if there was enough documentation, I would be pushing for that. I think that's not necessarily true. I think that it has that in itself might be a problem, since the documentation seems to be lacking. But the scale, everything goes back to scale, whether it be the Raleigh Hotel, whether it be anything, Versailles, anything. Scale, scale, scale. You know, like they talk about the virus, test, test, test. Well, this is scale, scale, scale. And to me, the scale is wrong. I agree with Kirk and Nancy, and rarely I agree with Scott, but I agree with what he said 150%. Something needs to be done about that. So that's all I have to say. So yes, Alfredo.
And I appreciate the comments from you, Jack, and the entire board. Jack, I just wanted to clarify, well, add to your conversation. I understand the concern about the massing, but on this one block, just looking at this one side, you do have already at Hotel 18 a 5-story addition, and that 5 stories to the rear. The other buildings on that block, which are the Cadet, the Atlantis, and the Richmond Apartments, all have their original historic character. So, person coming for total demolition, I would not see, first of all, if I applied for total demolition of the front facades of those historic buildings, I think Debbie would throw me out of the office first, and let alone get to this application. You're not setting a precedent, because it's the only building in the area that really shouldn't, although it's called contributing, if there was a reevaluation of the neighborhood, this would not be classified as contributing compared to the 2 buildings to the north. And so you're not opening this door that potentially you're going to have total demolition throughout this block, because there's no justification on the 3 remaining buildings. But they may come back with, whenever someone buys them and decides to renovate them, some type of addition in the rear that'll be 5 stories, similar to what happens within the Collins Park area. So I appreciate all the comments, and we will work and see how we can address many of the comments the board has raised and the public. But I just wanted to, I think this site is very unique in the sense of the facts that distinguish it from the other sites.
Thank you. Very well put. Does anyone else have anything to say or comments to make? Rick.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to point out on sheet as A018, the line of sight diagram. This question of scale, I think rather than addressing it by block, like this side of the street or that side of the street, we really should be thinking about scale as the full street section. The public space is framed by both blocks. And so I think that, when we're talking about scale, it's helpful, for the board and maybe for the architects, and maybe it's something that should be, required of projects like this, to include the street section to show us really what the character of the space is. I thought they did a nice job of showing the entire street elevations of both sides of the blocks. And I think, those demonstrate that while this building is a little bit bigger than some of its neighbors, it's really in keeping with a lot of the neighborhood. But the other drawing that I might want to include is a full street section of James Avenue. Just wanted to mention that.
And we can provide, we'll add that. The line of sight wasn't required in this plan with that, I know, but we understand the concern in the past Jack has had, so we could add another drawing to address your concern as well.
Thank you. Thank you. Anyone else?
I just wanted to ask, were you just asking for a line of sight to look the other way that would show the 11-story building? I think, if I understand, if you're taking a cross section of the street, it sort of depends where you're taking it to make it make sense. It will look different everywhere you take it. You may have a 5-story building on one side, and then the next come a little closer, you have the 11-story building. So it could look deceiving.
Yeah, I think it's common practice in urban design to show the public space through the street sections. And so it's true, you might not cut it through the 11-story building, but you might cut it through a typical building on that side of the block and show the 11-story building beyond in the distance, so as to more accurately depict what that, public space is like.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you both. Anyone else?
Can anybody see me or hear me?
Yes, we do. Luis.
I just wanted to say a couple of things. I happen to agree with what he was just saying, that we will be glad to show a cross section, because I think in this case it will dramatically show, and we may cut the street four sections through the street, but it will show the magnitude of the building right in front of us. And I do think that as much as we do what is required to provide a street elevation, I think in the real life experience is when you're walking or driving up and down the streets. And when you do that, to his point, you're seeing both sides. And I think it is important, when you think about the context and the overall urban context, that you're looking and taking into account both sides of the street. When you do that, and we'll be more than happy to even maybe show perspective as you're driving north or south on James, which may be better than just a section, but I do agree with him that it is a typical norm to have a sense of scale, that you cut 1 or 2 sections through the street to give a sense to the whoever you're presenting what you're proposing and how it relates to the what's around you. On Scott's comments, I honestly, when I at the beginning of the presentation said that I believe that we were doing the good thing by separating ourselves on the north and the south, the east and the west, that was good for the neighbors. I am a little bit lost when he says that this is not good for the neighbors, because I believe that as much as we can benefit of the massing of the building, making that building narrow in the center, creating not 1 but 2 courtyards that not only will be enjoyed by whoever is staying in the hotel, but by the neighbors on either side, I think it's a good thing. I think looking down from either the north or the south neighbors into the courtyard, into the water features, it's a plus to what it is there now. So I cannot honestly clearly see Scott's comment. We can certainly totally eliminate the trellis. We were hoping that the trellis would allow for planting to grow in the front of the building, which it would create a nice natural framework on the top. We can certainly look at the execution of the eyebrows to break up the massing and the squattiness Brian was mentioning. And we can try to use more maybe stone details on the building. As Kurt was mentioning, there's a lot of things that we believe we can do, and we can work with staff to try to contextually be more responsive to the original architects and to the neighborhood and to the massing of the building. But I honestly do not believe that this building at 5 stories, even if we have to take out the trellis, which will make it feel lower, it's out of context or not appropriate. I think it would be a good addition to the neighborhood and to the street.
Louis, let me just say that I mean, I didn't say that your interior courtyard would be bad for the neighbors. I said the neighborhood in general. You know, the city has, you know, they're always developing or modifying codes and whatnot, and design requirements. And one thing that's always in there is, as you go up in a building, you kind of, you know, set it back a little bit. That's so you don't have basically a wall, you know, right on the front property line, or right on the front facade of your building, not a tall wall. It's always, the top is usually set back. So as somebody's walking down the street or driving down the street, you know, they at least there's more light that comes in. There's more of a view. So it's not so much that it's bad for your neighbors to the north and south. I think it would be great for them. I think it would be great for your building. But I'm looking at people in the street. I'm looking at the neighborhood in general. So, you know, I just think that when I said it's, you know, you're benefiting your building and possibly your neighbors to the north and south, but it's to the detriment, in my opinion, to people on the street, people walking by, people driving by. You know, I don't have an issue at all with the height. You know, that's what you're allowed. Even if you have mechanicals on top, it gets higher. That's no problem. I guess my concern is where that height is located on the site. You know, I'm sure that, and I don't remember it, but that building on 18th Street, on just to the north of you, came in front of the HPB. And I don't know, maybe Debbie can remind us, but remember that if you go look, that building, they're adding height to that. It's in the back of the lot. You know, they're keeping a portion of the front, and that height is going in the rear. This one seems to contradict everything that, at least since I've been on the board, everything that we've always tried to advocate for, as either a city or a board. So that's my concern with the massing.
If I may just briefly say that if you are walking or driving north on James, when you look at the aerial rendering that we have, the building immediately to the south is 4 stories. It's closer to the street. And for my perspective, it's a fairly bulky building. It's a very massive building. And to the west, I hate to keep repeating it, we have an 11-story structure. So our building sets back 15 feet further back than the neighbors on the north and the south. The execution of the balcony and the facade has a lot of glass, which lends transparency. I honestly believe, and I know it sounds selfish, but when you are driving or walking north or south on James Avenue, our building, by setting itself back and having the amount of glass that it has compared to the amount of ratio of stucco versus glazing than our neighbors have, I honestly believe that our building will not be a detriment to the neighborhood, because I believe that the bulkiness that the building immediately to the south and immediately to the west are contributing substantially more to the bulkiness of the urban context than what we will be doing if we can successfully convince some of you that this is not a bad building.
Yeah.
Jack, can you hear me?
Stop. Let's all stop. We have to do one at a time and be recognized, or else we're going to have a Zoom bomb. So
Wait,
Nancy,
I have been trying.
Nancy, you're
I
next.
have been trying.
Okay. Nancy?
Okay, Gerbalda's finished?
Yes.
I only wanted to agree that we should have a view of the entire street, as mentioned by Rick. That should have been one of the requirements of every project. It was when the HP board started long ago. And somehow now we only get these pictures of places that are not even near the existing building. So I would like to see us continue and think about it, especially on this street. I don't know if you can get the idea that we're trying to protect and save the street. That has been, there have been a couple of mistakes. The tall building should have never been allowed there. And I think there's some kind of huge garage going on the north part of the second block. So of all things, we should be looking at the entire street and not just looking at the minutia that exists that we're talking about most of the time.
Thank you, Nancy. Scott?
No, I was just going to Louis, we can disagree on whether that's good or bad for the neighborhood. Obviously we disagree on that, and that's, who's right? I don't know. I'm just giving my opinion. He's giving his. So leave it at that, and hopefully he will look at something that maybe can be done, to address what I said. I mean, I know it was mentioned. I think Barry talked about the massing a little bit as well. Some of the front, that front facade. So maybe something can be looked at as far as that. I mean, overall, I think it's a nice looking building. I'm just concerned with how it does seem to stand out on that stretch on that road. And I know we talked about the 11-story building across the street and the one next to it. Those are two buildings. There are a lot of other buildings on the street that are much smaller. So, we don't seem to be mentioning those when we're comparing this building to others on the street. So, I mean, I'll leave it at that, and hopefully you'll look at some of that going forward.
Okay,
Thank you. We will.
Wait. Thank you, Scott. Who wants to speak now? Luis? Okay.
No, I'm saying thank you, and we will take a look at all those comments by Rick and Barry.
Okay. Thank you, Luis. I'd like to make just one last comment, if I might. I guess I'm fixated on drawing A002. And I want to bring up again what Mr. Goldblatt and Scott, I think, have been trying to get at. And I agree with them. If you look at the block there that this building is on, and you look at what surrounds it on all four sides, that block, all the other properties around that block are very tall in comparison to almost everything on this James Street block. The Ocean side, the 17th Street side is not, but the side, Washington Avenue side with the temple and those horribly tall apartment houses, this block forms almost a micro neighborhood.
That's right.
And I think it is the neighbors, this other lady, Miss Bayescu, who wrote to me, which I will forward to Debbie. They all say the same thing, that chipping away at the scale of what is on this block will encourage other people on the block to either come to us to tear down their buildings to redevelopment or to build taller structures in the rear. And little by little, this one block will come to resemble everything else around it. And that's not historic preservation. This is a fostering of urban development. There's nothing wrong with urban development, but we have a basically intact block. And I think to agree to the massing of this building as it stands with this huge facade sitting on the street, as compared to everything to the north of it and around it, it would be a terrible mistake. That's all I have to say. Nancy, do you want to say something?
Yes. No, I'm finished.
Okay, is everyone finished? Okay, Debbie and Nick?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We did skip over the minutes from the March meeting. So if I could have a motion to approve the March 9th HPB minutes, I would appreciate that.
I'll move to approve the minutes.
Okay, moved by Rick. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Nancy. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, thank you very much. Now that is done, we are going to move on to the next discussion. which is the Raleigh Hotel Assemblage project.
Can we take a few minutes just to make sure my next team is on? Lewis will be switched out for Kobe Carp.
Can we take a 2-minute bathroom break or whatever you want to call it?
You're the chair.
Okay.
Is that acceptable, Debbie and Nick?
That works for me. Would you like to, should we take 5?
Okay.
Okay.
You have the floor, Jack.
Well, welcome back to the second half of our session today. And we have the privilege and honor of talking to Kobe Carp and looking at his interesting projects for the Raleigh and associated buildings for the conglomeration. And we'll start off with, I guess, Debbie and Nick again.
And
thank you.
Mr. Chair, after Debbie introduces the item, I'll set the clock for 10 minutes.
Okay. Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Nick. So this next discussion is with regard to HPB file 190341. This is 1751, 1757, and 1775 Collins Avenue. When this is back before you, the applicant will be requesting a certificate of appropriateness for the partial demolition, renovation, and restoration of the 3 contributing buildings on the site, the construction of a detached ground level tower addition at the southeast portion of the site, and the construction of a detached ground level addition at the northeast portion of the site, and the construction of 2 attached additions. They are also going to be requesting 1 or more waivers and 1 variance to reduce the required subterranean rear setback. This is a very unique property. It is an assemblage of 3 lots that can each contain a contributing building. The 3 contributing buildings are starting from the north, the Raleigh Hotel. To the south of that is the Richmond Hotel, and then to the south of that is the South Seas Hotel. They have all been purchased and unified as one development parcel. It's important to note that the Raleigh portion, which is 1775, had previously gone to the board for substantial renovation, ground level additions at the rear, and a lot of site work. That was approved by the board in 2015. Subsequent to that, a full building permit was issued for only that site. So we currently have at the Raleigh an active construction site. And the work that is being done there is in conformance with the 2015 plans that were approved by the board. They are proposing some modifications to that site, and I'm going to get into that later. The unique thing about this is the Raleigh was the first to be constructed as in 1940, designed by L. Murray Dixon. The second 2, the Richmond and the South Seas, were both constructed 1 year later, and both also designed by L. Murray Dixon. The Richmond and the South Seas underwent significant renovations in 1954. And again, both the Richmond and the South Seas shared the same architect, Melvin Grossman. At that time, Melvin Grossman modified the fronts of both buildings as well as designed rear additions. So you have rear tower additions to both of those buildings. This current proposal focuses mainly on significant modifications to the Richmond and the South Seas, along with the associated new construction. However, one opportunity that staff was very excited about is revisiting what was approved previously for the Raleigh building. And I want to thank the applicant and their team for really looking at this through a different lens. It's basically a second look at what we could improve on the Raleigh. And I'm extremely pleased that the applicant worked with staff to come up with a plan that actually removes in staff's opinion, inappropriate rooftop additions on the Raleigh. That will result in a fully restored Raleigh hotel, which we do believe it's probably one of the most significant streamlined hotels in the world. And we do believe that this is highly notable, as that skyline feature of the Raleigh is so important to the character of not only the building, but also of the district. And we do think that that will make a significant improvement to this portion of the Art Deco district. So I just wanted to note that. We're also working with the applicant to get additional elements restored back in the Raleigh. But the public interiors will also remain restored, and that would be in accordance with the 2015 approval of the board and consistent with the current building permit that was issued. So all of the public interiors in the Raleigh were already required to be restored, and that is not changing here. With regard to the Richmond and the South Seas, the applicant is proposing to remove the front Melvin Grossman interventions, which were again done in 1954, to restore them back to their 1941 L. Murray Dixon designs. We have significant historic documentation for both of those buildings. So we have been working with the applicant to get everything as close as possible to the Dixon designs. That will result in a streetscape with the 3 L. Murray Dixon buildings, which we think will be an attribute to this area. So we are very supportive of that. We talk about that more in our staff recommendation. They are proposing some modifications to the lobbies of both the Richmond and the South Seas. Those lobbies, it's a little bit trickier for us to identify clear historic documentation because they have both been altered since their original construction. But we do have some requirements. For example, that both of those spaces have original terrazzo. The original terrazzo is supposed to be retained and restored. And there are features that we know of, like the location of the original reception desks, etc. With regard to the design of the new tower, we're supportive. We would note that it is a 200-foot tower that was approved as an ordinance amendment allowing that height in 2019. At that time, prior to the adoption of that ordinance allowing for the additional height, that was there was a lot of community outreach during that time, and that was a presentation given to the Historic Preservation Board and other members of the community. So that's where that that 200-foot allowable height comes from. It's important to note that the new tower is set back 270 feet from the fronts of the existing buildings. That, in staff's opinion, pushing this additional height eastward does significantly minimize the impact of the height as viewed from the Collins Avenue side of the property. So we are supportive of the massing. They are maintaining a view corridor, which was very important for us, between the Raleigh Hotel and the property to the south. That we believe has been very successful. Again, we're supportive of the architectural language of the new tower. In conjunction with the new tower, there is a substantial subterranean level proposed. That is something that staff had noted in our report, that while it's great that we're moving things underground, which will have the least amount of impact on the district, we are concerned primarily about the portions of the basement that may impact the structural integrity of the two existing buildings. The excavation is proposed currently to actually extend below both the South Seas and the Richmond buildings. So we are wanting to get a lot more information about that. At this point, we're not comfortable with that level of excavation underneath the existing buildings. As we've noted in our report, there have been one particular recent instance where when that was being done, we actually ended up losing a building. In that case, the applicant would be required and was required to go back to the board. However, once construction is that far along, there's not a whole lot we can do to save some of these buildings when a situation like that happens. We've also noted the city's resiliency initiatives and questioned the applicant, and we're working with the applicant in order to come up, if the board does find that the extent of the basement is appropriate, to come up with some more specific strategies with regard to water management when we're looking at the basement. The issue is not necessarily the basement itself, but when you have a basement level that covers a good amount of the site, it's somewhat difficult to get significant amount of soil and landscaping on top of that. So we are asking for some additional information, and in our recommendation, we would like the applicant to explore perhaps including some water storage or a plan for future adaptation to be used as water storage in the light of the water table and sea level rise in city's water management strategies. So that was the primary concern. The waivers are pretty standard. The applicant is requesting a waiver from the non-conforming setback and parking credits for the existing portions of the Dixon buildings. That would be the Richmond and the South Seas that are proposed to be retained and restored. The variance deals with the subterranean rear setback. And this is at the eastern portion of the site where the existing basement, so the Raleigh portion of the basement, which is at the eastern portion along 18th Street where you have vehicular access, actually goes subterranean. A portion of that basement is already permitted and I believe is already significantly excavated. They are requesting to expand a portion of that basement, and that results in the variance required. And that would be to facilitate a drop-off and pickup area for the new residential tower. So that is with regard to the variance. And I don't believe I have anything else, but I know it is an extremely complex project, and I'm sure I went through things very quickly, so I am here to answer any questions the board members or the public has. Thank you.
Thank you, Debbie. Shall we have the presentation now? Okay, welcome Alfredo and Kobe, and let's move forward.
Okay. Good afternoon. Morning still. Alfredo Gonzalez on behalf of the applicant. I'm here today with Kobe Carver. We will presenting with myself. But as part of the team, we have many people on the call, including Arthur Marcus, Christy Brush, Michael Schro, the principal owner, is also on the call. So we'll be available to answer questions, anyone on the team if needed. So I'd like to first do a little jump in an introduction, and then I'll turn it over to Kobe. As Debbie stated, last year, Michael Schro was able to purchase the Raleigh and was able to put together the other two sites, the Richmond and the South Seas. We came before this board last summer about this exact same time. Hello?
It just went off.
I got muted. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay. Where did I get, did my whole presentation get lost?
No, you just cut out for a few seconds.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
All right, I guess someone didn't like me. Anyway, so last summer, while we embarked on this journey of the opportunity to take 3 L. Murray Dixon jewels, the Richmond, the Raleigh, and the South Seas, and undertake a text amendment that would allow up to a 200-foot tower in the rear on larger sites of greater of 115,000 square feet with additional setbacks that were required. we were able to obtain support from the board at that time, MDPL, and all the community outreach we did. Now, I want to caveat this, and this goes to Nancy, especially, that last year, when everyone supported the text amendment, we didn't have the plans or the actual building being proposed. So everyone supported the change in the code to allow to go 200 feet, caveat seeing this plan. So we've spent the last year, instead of coming, and Debbie, we've talked to Debbie, been working with staff, and while this project could have come early in the fall or in the winter time of 2009 to the board, they really wanted to evaluate the site and look at all the different options. And we're now advertised and set for the June HPB meeting. We've started our outreach again, as we did last year. And we've already had a presentation, our first presentation to MBPL. On Friday, we are actually presenting to the Collins Park next week. And we're doing this discussion. We agreed to do the discussion item, and thank you for allowing us this time. So what I really wanted to talk, and then I wanted to add that this is 3 separate sites. As Debbie explained, the Raleigh, in a nutshell, has a building permit and approvals from the previous owner and under construction. The Richmond, which has not had any renovation since for years, and then the South Seas that has an active approval for a site development of just the South Seas. Here we're by combining all 3 sites, we allow for a unique opportunity to really evaluate the whole quarter of a block and how best to preserve the historic buildings. I will add that yes, we're asking for the 2 variances. The 2 waivers for all 3 buildings as part of this newer project, and 1 variance to we need to do 104 square feet variance for the basements that are even built out behind the Raleigh to allow to the turn radius for exiting. And as Kobe will explain in his plans, you'll see the basement level and the minimal variance we're requesting on the project. Other than that, we're not requesting any other variances. So at this point, I'd really like to turn it over to Kobe so he can go through the PowerPoint. And again, I'll reserve any rebuttal after public comment, and we'll be here to answer questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Alfredo. Welcome, Toby.
Thank you, Jan.
Kobe, you have another speaker on.
Can you hear me? That's a problem.
We have echo.
Can you hear me now? Is that better? No, it still has a.
Kobe, do you have a headset?
I'm actually in my office with a computer and a Polycom in front of me with the screen on.
Your microphone is picking up your speaker, and it's creating a
Got it. Can you
a
hear
feedback
me now
loop.
any better? Can you hear me now any better, Nick?
A little better, yeah.
A little better? Thank you. So, Debbie, do you want me to take over the presentation, or do you want to go page by page on that?
Kobe, we can barely hear you.
Can you hear me now? I know. Debbie, can you hear me?
Jessica will put the PowerPoint, I think, right?
Yeah, I just want the PowerPoint, please. There we go. Thank you very much. Can I control the PowerPoint?
You just would direct me to the next slide. So you just would tell me which slide you would like, and I'll go ahead and take control of the PowerPoint for you. So just say next slide whenever you're ready.
Kobe? Did we lose Kobe?
Kobe, is your audio on?
Kobe? Hold on, let me call him still. Okay, Kobe's going to call in via phone so you could hear him clearly for this part of the presentation. Sorry.
Hi, guys. Can you hear me? Hi, guys.
Yes.
There you go. Can you hear me okay? They said yes.
Yes.
Okay, great. So good morning, number one. Thank you so much for your time and patience and spending time with us here this morning. As Debbie and as Alfredo has mentioned, we have had the pleasure of looking at this site assembled by Marco Chabot in the past year. And specifically, this plan that is in front of you is the site plan. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So the site plan that we have here, basically based on our discussions originally and going through the text amendment, really has afforded us an opportunity to look at the relationship of the Dixon buildings that were originally obviously was built by the South Seas and the Richmond, and then later on by the Raleigh. What has become very interesting is that also by the text amendment, which Alfredo mentioned, is in our discussions with city staff and with Nancy, we looked at the relationship of where the tower can be, meaning the new Raleigh residences. So when we started to meet with city staff and we saw the opportunity, if you will, to step into the Raleigh and carve back into the historic building and bring it back to the way it was originally, if you can please go to the next image, you can see that on this site plan, we had an opportunity to really bring back the Richmond and South Seas to the way they were originally, and introduce the public spaces into the Collins Avenue right away. And at the same time, if you look at how the Raleigh is set back from the 18th Street and Collins, it is set back. And the reason it is that it has a beautiful green landscape area in the front with a terrace, that when you look to the south, it has your view, if you will, towards the Richmond. While we looked at those buildings and we saw an opportunity to really create a more open green space, and I'm sure some of you have come along and saw the Raleigh Gardens, which we did along the boardwalk, we took that as inspiration to pull that green carpet landscape throughout the site and wrap the historic pool area, which thus far has been in the shade because of additions and modifications that were built behind the Richmond and behind the South Seas. And those blocks continued on essentially to the middle of the pool. So if you look at the backyard of the Richmond and South Seas, those additions which we are proposing to demolish were essentially not only shading the garden courtyard of the original Raleigh, but also shading the historic pool that is the Raleigh pool. So meeting with staff and looking at opportunities to bring back the Richmond to its original glory and to bring back the South Seas, and if we can go please to the next image, it created an opportunity to make a composition on the site that really allowed us to see three-dimensionally the South Seas, the Richmond, and the Raleigh in a composition as if you would see it from the historic pool area. So what we did is we kept a very light a footprint on the site, creating landscaping and pools which would relate from the backyard of the Raleigh onto the backyard of the Richmond and South Seas and onto the beachfront. If you go to the next image, please. It created an opportunity for us to go into, and you can see in red where we're highlighting the proposed removal of the additions and modifications to the Raleigh, obviously along Collins Avenue and also along West Side. But most important, if you look at the architectural graphics or the architectural movement that Dixon it has on the building, whether it's a horizontal line of the glass or the vertical fluidity of the vertical towards the Raleigh sign, and the desire to be a vertical building is not only on the Raleigh, but if you go to the next image, please, you can see that the more we started to remove in red are the elements that we're looking to remove and bring back to the microfiche on the left-hand side. You can see that elements like the vertical Raleigh Monument sign has come back to fruition and has come back to potentially its original glory as the beacon on the corner of 18th Street and Collins Avenue. At the same time, if you look at the geometries, whether it's the nautical round windows or it is the streamlined horizontal movement of the corner treatment that is fluid from the tower itself to the base and also to the tower design, if you will, of the top, it became very interesting because if you go to the next image, please, and you look at the microfilm of the 1940s original Raleigh, you see that on all facades. You see it on the 18th Street facade, you see it on the Collins Avenue facade, and you see it on the original 1940s microfiche that it was so carefully assembled by Arthur Marcus into this composition. So if you go to the next image, please, what you see then is an opportunity to essentially remove a substantial amount of additions and modifications that are currently permitted and are on the approved plans, as was previously noted, and bring it back to its original design and intent by Murray Dixon. If you go to the next image, please.
Sorry to interrupt you. You have 2 minutes left on my clock, but I think you're probably going to need additional time, right?
If you allow me, I'll beg for additional time, and if you'll give me such, I'll be very grateful. Thank you so much.
So granted.
How much time would you like? Would you like me to set for another, 5 or 10 minutes?
5 minutes. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you.
Yes. So in this image right here, which is the proposed restored Richmond, you see the Richmond historic facade on the left-hand side, and then you can see on the right-hand side, that's exactly what we are proposing to do to bring it back. And you can see in the motion of the DNA, you have the vertical fluidity in the middle of the design of the building. You have the corner treatments with the horizontals. And then again, you have the monument verticality come up in the middle, as same as the Raleigh does in its original configuration. At the same time, what he did, Dixon, is the Richmond and the South Seas, which are right next to each other, were built at about the same time, were closer to Collins Avenue. But when he built the Raleigh, which is a little bit taller, he set it back. He set it back so he can have a better composition. And you can see in the middle, that's the Richmond modifications and changes that we are proposing to remove and bring back to the original 1940s microfiche. Next image, please. This is the same sort of DNA and thought process that we're implementing into the South Seas. Again, you can see the vertical fluidity in the middle with the inspiration of the vertical movement. And then you can see the geometries that are being played, whether at the base of the building or the sides of the building. But it's a very unique terminology, thoughtful of details of both the glazing or the rooftop fenestration or the lobby fenestration. If you go down to the next image, please. Here you can see it's a image of the street where the Marseille is the anchor towards the south. The Raleigh is the anchor towards the north, yet it is set back from the corner, which reveals and protects, if you will, by Dixon, the Richmond and the South Seas relationship, the pedestrian relationship, and the potential of how it engages the street with the new facades to them. Next image, please. Here you can see a close-up again, coming up to the South Seas and the Richmond in their original Dixon elevations and design. And the Raleigh, again, is set back. And that is an interesting gesture, right? The setting back is a very important gesture on the site. And if you go to the next image, please. This is obviously from the other corner, looking with the Marseille to the south, and then keeping the Raleigh on the north, and having the Raleigh on the corner. And what you have there is you have an opportunity to really celebrate the setback, right? Because the setback of the Raleigh allows you to explore and appreciate the Richmond and the South Seas. That is really, really very important for us, for our design. And that kind of a design intent shows you how the Marseille is set forward, right? So when we had an opportunity, next image, please, to sit down with the city staff and look at this as a composition on the street, you can clearly see how the Marseille is on the right, the Raleigh is on the left, right? And it is set back. So in perspective, it really does humble its image. And you can barely see over the Richmond, the new tower, which originally we went to the text amendment and we proposed it was closer to Collins Avenue, so it was more visible. We had an opportunity to go back and push it back, meaning we met with DEP. They allowed us to push it closer towards the ocean, which then allowed more light and air and sun, which I'll show you in a second, onto the backyards. But you can clearly see the relationship to the South Seas, the Richmond, and specifically the Raleigh to the south, and how they engage the street. If you go to the next image, please. You can see, looking down Collins Avenue, how it is that the pedestrian movement is then engaged in the materiality of the stone and the glazing and the detail of the glazing and the fenestration, which is vertical, and the geometries are so intricate, create, and they move also in the same DNA to the Raleigh to the north. Next image, please. And here is the Raleigh again, where you can see the engagement of the front yard and how open it is and how it implores and explores the north facade of the Richmond at the point of arrival, which then lets you see the South Seas and the Richmond in a more potential three-dimensional way. And you can start to see the geometries and the designs that Dixon had originally in the Richmond and the South Seas being played a few years later into a taller structure, which is the Raleigh. Next image, please. And here, what we did is we decided to go into the north side of the Raleigh, into the south side of the Raleigh, to show the building separation. We became very acknowledged with staff and looking at this master plan with Michael Chabot and the rest of the team, that there is a greater opportunity to open up the vistas between the buildings and let the public flow through and make the site, which has now been assembled for the first time, more porous, to make it a view corridor to the public right-of-way of Collins Avenue. We felt it's very important and to celebrate it. You can see on the south side we have the Marseille, and now because we have removed the additions and the modifications to the 80s and 90s, we can start to see the north side of the Marseille. Next image, please. By doing that kind of a study, it allowed us, you see the Marseille on the left, and you can see now the Raleigh on the right, which is on the north side, and you can see where the Raleigh Gardens and the Raleigh Courtyard, as you all have been through the Raleigh public spaces, you come to the garden outside. Now it is in the sun. The Marseille is on the left and the Raleigh is on the right. With the additions and the modifications that have been built in the 80s and 90s have been removed. This is the sunset pool, because in the morning this pool gets sun, right? Because we have removed the 7-story additions. This pool only gets shaded by the Marseille later on in the afternoons. Next image, please. This is the view, and you can start to see on the historic pool, obviously, with its relationship to the back lanais of the Raleigh to the right, with the courtyard garden of the Raleigh to the right, and you can see the historic Folly Pavilion of the Lifeguard to the left, with its round shape and form. You can also see where we are proposing an additional open green space, because we have a lot of light now coming facing south as the sun rises in the east and sets on the west along the southern axis. A lot more light comes not only into the historic pool, but also into the garden of the L-shaped Raleigh that brings the sun and the light as it originally was there into the open spaces and the garden spaces. Next image, please. Here you can see, again, from the Raleigh looking back, obviously, and seeing the pavilion, the Lifeguard Pavilion. We want to celebrate it. We want to enhance it. And we're keeping a very light footprint on towards the ocean with a very light food and beverage, open, cross-ventilated, curvilinear structure that relates more to the nautical feeling of the Lifeguard Pavilion, which we left standing. And what we have done is we have disengaged the new structure, the new pavilion, from the historic Lifeguard, so that you can walk through it and experience it in the round. Same thing with the pool. Same thing with the backyard. Same thing with the backyard of the Raleigh and the Richmond and the South Seas. If you go to the next image, please, you can see this is the pavilion, the pavilion that we are proposing. It's open air, cross-ventilated, and it just lets you see through back to the Raleigh and appreciate the Raleigh, and really see the landscaping that some of you may have experienced by walking along the Raleigh Gardens, growing Basel, and how we are now proposing to bring it through the site. Next image, please. And this is from the street, from 18th Street, looking back towards the ocean, towards the east. And you can see where the pavilion is, where in the foreground you have the lifeguard pavilion, and you have the ability to come in to the site and penetrate on the east side of the lifeguard pavilion and walk through and really get light and air into this composition. Next image, please. So this is an image from the ocean, but you can clearly see on the left-hand side the Marseille open with its view corridors onto the ocean. And on the right-hand side, you can see the L-shaped Raleigh, which is set obviously a little bit more easterly on 18th Street. Next image, please. This image is on here specifically so you can look at the geometries and how the breaking of the play of the geometry, both horizontal and vertical, relates to the height and the geometry and the DNA of Dixon into the new structure. How it goes from the Richmond and the South Seas onto the Raleigh, how it steps up and set back, and then how it's set back even further and into the new structure, which is 250 plus feet back. This is an elevation which shows you how it all relates together. Next image, please. This is the setback from the street, and you can see how we're breaking up the massing to relate to the Raleigh as Dixon has always done. Next image, please. This is obviously with the gardens and the landscaping looking with the Raleigh setback from the Richmond and the South Seas, and obviously our tower setback even more. Next image, please. And then the building itself is not straight, it is set back. It steps back by itself, same as the Raleigh has done historically and will continue to do. This is how we are coming down into the lower level basement parking, which basically lets our new tower float up in the air so you can see the historic facades through and enjoy the landscaping throughout the whole site for the light footprint. Next image, please.
Kobe, how much additional time do you think you need?
If you give me 1 minute, I think I'm done. I'm just going to spend a minute talking about the basement, which is the basement on the right-hand side on 18th Street, which is the current basement, which has already been done based on the Carlos 2Z plans and has been permitted. Well, we have had now an opportunity. There's a basement under the historic Raleigh. By this Raleigh Residences basement, we are connecting the two. So we have created a vehicular, pedestrian, and entry behind the lifeguard pavilion, bringing you down below with an opportunity to create a drop-off for the residences and create a connectivity between the Raleigh basement to the new lower level of the Raleigh residences, not digging underneath the Raleigh, not digging underneath the Richmond, not digging underneath the South Seas, and not digging underneath the historic pool. Next image, please. We have submitted for the record also a protection elements by the structural engineer. Next item, please, is the blow-ups of the restoration of the finishes, the materials, which Arthur Marcus has very nicely created a very nice books, which I think is in your possession. But it clearly shows the materials and the finishes, not only in the outside that Dixon has, but also on the inside, which we intend on bringing back into the project. Some of them, for example, as Daniel has brought to our attention, there were round windows. There were round windows also on the Raleigh, and there were round windows on the South Seas and on the Richmond. And what we are looking to do is see if they were built behind or they were covered up later on. And we will find that out, and that's what we will bring back. Next image, please. Same thing on the South Seas. This is what we want to do. We want to bring it back to its original status with the outside veranda, with the pedestrian experience on the street on Collins Avenue, and then the stepping back of the Raleigh. Next image, please. This is for discussion, how it is that we can propose to take that space. And we have glazing that is facing north, and this is at the Richmond. So you can see the Raleigh, and we thought it would be interesting to open up a second floor so that the windows on the second floor also let light and air in, and you can see more of the Raleigh, yet at the same time create definition of what that ceiling is that floats on top. And right now we have a cove, but maybe it's the reverse. Maybe there's a floating ceiling, which is disengaged, so you can see and have a relationship, if you will, to the upper level and experience the Raleigh in its visualization from the interior of the Richmond. Next image, please. Again, the same thing on the southeast. The southeast has a visibility immediately adjacent to the Richmond. Next image, please. We brought this to your edification because Nancy did say, Kobe, look, you need to look at this. And this is the original text amendment tower footprint. And you can see that it really came to the east wall of the Raleigh and or to the east wall of the Marseille. And now we've had an opportunity to slide it back. And by sliding it back towards the ocean, we disengaged it from the Marseille and we disengaged it from the Raleigh. And we moved it easterly to the 50-yard line, if you will, of the historic pool. Next image, please. These are just that's the images of the previous approved demolition, but I don't need to get into that. And that should do my presentation. Thank you so much. If you can go back to the first page. Thank you.
Thank you very much for a really excellent presentation. It's greatly appreciated. Joe, now we have what, Debbie, public comment?
We do have members of the public that would like to speak. We have Ms. Nancy Gutierrez, who is first. If we're going to open, are we opening to public comment? Mr. Chair?
Sure.
And
Okay,
Mr. Chair, I'll set the clock at 2 minutes per speaker.
Thank you.
Ms. Gutierrez, you are welcome to express your comments. If you take yourself off of mute, we will be able to hear you. If maybe we could go to the second speaker and check back with Nancy Gutierrez. So the second speaker is Daniel Seraldo. Daniel, would you like to give some comments?
Yes, thank you. We reviewed the proposal with the applicant and our advocacy committee last week at the Miami Design Preservation League. And we also want to thank the applicant for allowing us access to the site yesterday. A few of our members were able to explore the site yesterday. It was a last minute request, so thank you for allowing us that. And so as far as our current position, we do support bringing the facades of the smaller buildings back to the original L. Murray Dixon designs, and therefore making this trio of three buildings that he designed as originally. However, we oppose the removal of ceiling floor plates in the lobbies of the Richmond and South Seas. So there were some renderings showing the double height of the lobbies, and we are opposed to that because we believe it changes the geometry of the original design of those lobbies. We support staff's concerns about the basement construction, its possible damage to the original structures. And finally, while we strongly appreciate the presentation by the applicants, we do need a little more time to review and discuss the significant proposal and also to obtain additional feedback from our stakeholders and stakeholders in the community. And I had sent some photos previously in a PDF, but I'll save that presentation maybe for the official hearing. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Daniel.
Okay, so we have Nancy Gutierrez. If she is able to unmute herself, we're here for public comment. So while we're having difficulties with that, we can move on to the next member of the public. I believe Jeff Bass from Shubin and Bass is on the line. Jeff, would you like to give some comments to the board?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Mr. Chair, members of the board, good morning. My name is Jeffrey Bass, 46 Southwest 1st Street is my address. I represent the owner of the Marseille Hotel. You've seen it on the drawings. That is located at 1741 Collins Avenue. I'll be brief. Before I start, I'd be remiss if I didn't note with sadness the passing of Arva Parks, who made the lives of all of us in this historic preservation endeavor that much richer. The Marseille is really the only contiguous neighbor to the property, to the project. It is a contributing building, both within the local and national register historic districts. And I'm always pleased to see my longtime and close friends, Alfredo and Kobe. I miss them. We met with them almost a year ago, and it has been radio silence since then. I'm quite hopeful, particularly with some strong encouragement from this board, that between now and the next hearing, the Marseille will have the opportunity to sit with the developer team, address and resolve our concerns. While we have not had the benefit of a full set of plans review as of the moment, I'd like to just raise a few issues for this board's consideration. This is a substantial and ambitious project. Staff notes the risk to the structural integrity of the Richmond and the South Seas. We have very serious concerns about how this will impact the structural integrity of the Marseille, and particularly how it can survive the substantial excavation, subterranean work, the dewatering work of the proposed basement, as well as the seismic forces of the construction in very close proximity to the Marseille, and how we will survive the hotel, the noise caused by this very ambitious construction phase. We're also a bit troubled by the variance request, having seen no legal hardship to support it, but I'm comfortable and confident that with the opportunity to sit and work with the developer team, we could come back before you, hopefully being fully supportive with all of our concerns addressed. Thank you so much for the opportunity to present, and thank you for your service.
Thank you very much. Very enlightening. Debbie.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We do not see any other members of the public that would wish to speak at this time. So we can go to board comment. Ms. Gutierrez had put her hand down. Alfredo?
I'd like a moment just to do a quick rebuttal, if possible.
Okay. So, Mr. Chair, I think we can hear back from the applicant for the rebuttal, and then we can close it to board comment.
Certainly.
I just wanted to add, and in response to, and it's always a pleasure to work with Jeff Bass, and I know he represents the Lloyd from the Marseille. We have sent them packages a couple weeks ago. Obviously, we weren't anticipating having this hearing. We were scheduled for the June meeting as our first meeting, so we had started public outreach with all the stakeholders, including the neighbors, when this opportunity presented itself. So we will continue to work with them. And in addition, I wanted just to note that everything we've done designing our plan is taking the Marseille into consideration, particularly since there was a previously approved project with basements and construction within 5 feet of their setback. But that's all I have to say at this point.
Thank you, Alfredo. So Debbie, now we're going to board members. Okay. First, let's do Barry.
I'll be fairly brief, very brief. I can't express how much I do appreciate and enjoy these buildings coming back. That's just, I think that's a great maybe incentive for the other things they want to do. I do concur with the MDPL feeling of removing the floor plates inside those buildings. I think the restorations are more than just the facades. And just, I think the landscape concept around there is very nice. I do have a question about, or concern about, how the landscape seems to segregate the tower from the rest of the project. That may just be in my view, but that's the way it seems to me. And my only other comment is I just have a big, just grappling with this 250 foot tower there. So close to the ocean, so close to these other buildings. I would still be concerned. I know you moved it back so you get more sun on your pool deck. I think you're still going to have a lot of shade there for a big portion of the day, and would like to see some sort of studies indicating that. And really, at this point, that's all I have. I am honestly grappling with the size of that tower.
Mr. Klein, we're doing a sound study.
Are we open to rebuttal right now, or are we on the?
Let Barry finish, and then.
I'm sorry. I apologize. I thought he was done.
No, I'm finished. That's really my comments. I'm just saying, architecturally, I'm being very honest and upfront. I'm grappling with the size of that. That's it.
Thank you, Barry. Debbie, is there rebuttal at this point?
I would recommend that we go through each of the board members' concern first right now. And then if there's additional time, we could hear from the applicant. But I think it's important to get all of the board members' perspective without interruption.
Thank you. We'll do that. Okay, next, Kirk.
Thank you. So first of all, I just have to say this for the record. I have struggled with the height. Wasn't able to swallow it the first time around. And to me, this part of the Collins skyline is so important. I think the Raleigh and these 3 hotels, I mean, the other 2, maybe not to the extent of the Raleigh, but I think they contribute so much to the feel and to the to what South Beach is, to the essence of what South Beach is. And the height for me, I just have to say this, I respect the consensus of the board. I was present during part of the discussion about the height. I struggled with it then, I struggle with it now. To me, this section of Collins Avenue is, again, it's the very essence of one of the things I find so tremendously alluring worldwide for South Beach. And so I just have to say that for the record. And having said that, I respect the consensus of this board, and I'm not going to let that be my only topic of discussion. I just had to say it. I'm glad that Barry also brought up the concept of shade, because everywhere I've seen it on the beach, the Raleigh has been, it's been tremendously important to me. It certainly is one of the drivers for my even being here now, being on this board, living in Miami Beach. And I know it was for my grandparents as well, who lived in Bal Harbour throughout my childhood. The Raleigh is an icon. And so again, I worry about casting a shade on the pool, because the Raleigh is just phenomenal inside and out. And I'm excited about seeing it renovated. I think I stayed there back in 1992, and I mean, it was pretty much, I'm not sure when it was first renovated, but it was perfect then. I hope it's going to be perfect, a perfect representation of what, the best quality historic restoration we're capable of in this city. It deserves to be that. So moving on with my other topics of discussion, the integrity, the structural integrity with the excavation, as staff have concerns with that. There's not any way that I could support it without feeling that staff were comfortable that we're protecting the integrity of all of these buildings and all of their historic significance. So I follow staff on the excavation. I'm concerned with it. I'm going to talk about the facades of the Richmond and the South Seas. It's interesting. It's an interesting discussion, and I don't disagree with the forward direction that this project is moving in terms of restoring the Dixon facades. And yet My perspective is the Melvin Grossman workings on those facades of 1954 are iconic in their own right, and they've been an incredible part of Miami Beach's history. Interestingly, anyone that's been involved in the Renaissance of Miami Beach will never have seen what those hotels looked like. Back then, it's going to be something brand new, probably to most anybody alive right now. And so in my mind, you know, I sort of wonder, because I do think that Melvin Grossman did a great job on those two facades. If there's components maybe that could be incorporated somehow, and I'm not sure they can. You're going from a very snazzy, you know, mid-century presentation with Melvin Grossman's reworking and the neon signs back to something that I think most of us would generally expect to see more on an Ocean Drive than what we're used to on Collins Avenue. So I would just ponder that question if there's any way. I support going back to the Dixon facades. I just wonder, and maybe even with the signage, if there's a way somehow of incorporating, because 1954 is not like 1980. It's also a very formative mid-century modern period of Miami Beach's history. Let's see, I have concerns with the beach club structure. I feel like possibly in my mind, I see it competing with the pool house structure. Initially, the pool house structure in the back was sort of the bookend leading to, I believe, like a flat cabana area. And I'm concerned with the design that the beach club structure, particularly where it abuts the pool house, where it curves and it sits out further. I'm concerned with it competing, and I'm wondering if possibly doing more of a straight treatment, a corner there rather than a curve, would possibly be another consideration. I do think that the original pool house or lifeguard structure, whatever you're referring to it as, deserves to stand out. Additionally, interesting, I wanted to know, I'm not sure how to put these up, and there's not a page number, but this is the historic report for the Richmond Hotel, not the South Seas, but it's showing this detail with the stucco design on the actual South Seas. And I believe the way I'm seeing this, that this is part of the section of the South Seas that will be demolished. And so I wanted to ask about those sort of details. Yeah, I value, can I let Alfredo respond to that? Jack?
Sure. Okay. One time.
Just really quick. The difference you're seeing is El Murray Dixon was a three-story, these were three-story structures.
Mm-hmm.
Grossman added and filled in the fourth floor and created a fourth floor. So that's the difference you're seeing.
So this design that matches the circle and lines on the front of the building were done by Melvin Grossman, is what you're saying?
Melvin Grossman did an addition on top of the
Can you
small
see that
tower.
where I'm pointing to? The circles and connecting to the lines, which, are you able to see that? I don't know if I'm holding it well enough.
I think, what page were you on?
There's not a page number, that's the problem. It's midway into the Richmond Hotel Historic Resources Report. Interestingly, because it's on the South Seas.
Yeah, but that is part of it, and we'll sit down with you and answer that in detail. But that should be part of the Grossman, because Grossman did the addition on top of the South Seas in Richmond, not just the rear tower.
I would say, and I don't know if this is appropriate, but I'm going to add it in here, for such an important project. I mean, I would like to visit the structure, and I don't know if there's a possibility. I don't know, you know, in terms of the COVID isolation, if there's an opportunity, but I think the details are just so important. So I'll throw that in there.
We invited MDPL yesterday with mask and distancing, and they walked the site. So
Is there a
happy-
possibility that I could stop by
Yes.
before this comes back before us?
We will invite. I'll invite any board member who wants to be inspect the site. More than happy to do that.
Okay. You mentioned in the plans quite a few times historic colors, to bring back the historic colors, but I'm not sure if I got a clear sense of what those actually are and what they'll look like. Well, what are those colors when you're talking about these three
Kirk,
properties?
let's leave that and come back and make a list of what you want, and he can address everything, because we're going to fragment the discussion.
Okay, then I'll finish since you're rushing me along. I don't support removing the floor plates. I think the importance of these buildings is authenticity. I feel that way in the Raleigh as well. It's interesting to show the built construction of a project, but these buildings are too important and they're too ready to be all original. So I have a problem with that. And the biggest thing I want to mention, on top of everything else, connecting to my concern with the height. If we're living with the height, and I'm prepared to support the consensus of the board, like I said, I wanted to make a recommendation, and this connect with the Beach Club property in Surfside. And I don't know how many of my fellow board members or planning staff are familiar with that project, but in the tower of that structure, which I always had a concern with as well, of how it might overwhelm the existing structure. I'm not sure what type of glass treatment they used on there, but it reflects so purely, it's translucent, and at the same time, it so purely reflects the tones of the sky that it gives it a lightness. And this is a place where I think lightness is really needed. And I've never seen it on any other buildings in this area. And you could particularly appreciate it in Surfside from the beach side, which none of us could see right now, because that's where you're actually viewing the skyline. But I would urge us to look into the possibility of using that type of glass treatment to lighten this tower as much as possible in relation to the contributing structures. Thank you.
Thank you, Kirk. Let's see, Max?
Thank you. I think this is an impressive project. And in a lot of the fact that it's impressive comes to the scale. And it's not often that we get to have a project of this scale kind of in Miami Beach. I heard the term opportunity a lot in the presentation. I think this is also an opportunity to integrate the objectives of historic preservation with sustainability and resilience and stormwater management, and sort of exploring the concern that Debbie articulated in the staff analysis. It's the basement structure. I think I understand and I respect the tension there with wanting to keep things out of sight and the importance there. But also just given the reality of sea level rise and contending with that, and changes in rainfall and what that means for stormwater management, that a project of this scale sort of opens up opportunities to be innovative in that thinking. And I saw the response letter from April 6th to partially address the staff analysis question about the basement and the impervious area. I would want to see some clarification on what is the proposed increase in impervious area. The number that's in the response letter is different than what's in the set that we received. They're both increases, and maybe it's just a matter of the degree of the increase or the size of the increment. And just conceptually, we were talking about chipping away earlier in this meeting. I don't know if that metaphor really holds through here, because chipping away at impervious surfaces is kind of a good thing, but we don't want to see an incremental increase in paved area. What we should be looking for are opportunities to bring more permeable surfaces in, or if that's not possible, what are the opportunities for more innovative stormwater management, living with water, ways to get sort of a dual use out of the underground area. And if you're looking for inspiration on that, I think the Urban Land Institute report could be a source of ideas for that. And I think that is my main comment. Thank you.
Thank you. Let's see who's next. Scott?
I think the one of the best parts about this project is the restoration of the existing buildings, mainly the Raleigh, and bringing it back to what it really should look like. The other two, the South Seas and Richmond, I mean, we are demoing part of it, but that's, I guess you can call that the nondescript part of it. The facades, or at least the first 50 feet off of Collins Avenue, is going to be restored. I mean, we can debate again, should it go back to the original, or maybe the changes Grossman made. But you know, I'm sure when it's all said and done, it'll be a very nice restoration. As far as the floor plate in there, I'm open either way. I mean, I'd like to see it remain as close to original as possible, but I'm not completely opposed to having that two-story or open lobby in the building. So I'll leave that at that. The basement, you know, I think the city makes a good point where, you know, it's going to be very tricky to sort of undercut the existing buildings and kind of put a basement in there. We've had issues like this before, and they don't always end up well. We've had projects come back where, you know, structurally we've had some issues when buildings were undercut. But, you know, even though that's a relatively small portion, I didn't think about it until the building to the south, the Marseille, brought it up. You know, there's a lot more, even though it's not going under their building, it's still a substantial excavation on a longer portion along their property. So that's really something that before I'd be ready to go along with the basement, they'd have to really give us some assurances, whether it's plans or however they're going to do it, that everything's going to go as per plan. You know, I'm not opposed to the basement in general. I just think it's kind of funny that, you know, with the city now, everything is, we're raising our base flood or adding a foot to our base flood elevation. We're trying to tell buildings to build higher, but at the same, because of sea level rise, but at the same time, we're seeing more and more buildings going lower as well. I think that's going to be, again, I'm not opposed to that. That's really an issue for the building. If they want to build low or build a basement level and risk that going forward, that's up to the individual, the property. As far as the new building itself, I mean, I do have that concern with the overall height and the size, but I mean, it is something that we talked about before, and the code has changed to allow that. So as far as the height, I mean, it is what it is. My concern is with, I think it was mentioned before, it is kind of the massing, and it's pushed very, I mean, it's nice that it's way off of Collins Avenue and virtually invisible when you're going up and down Collins Avenue. But how about people on the beach? I mean, it is going to be a rather large building very close to the boardwalk. And I wonder how, I mean, I just maybe would like to see some renderings of that, people walking along the boardwalk, and what that building, what the new addition is going to look like for people on the beach and on the boardwalk. But I just wonder, and this is a question for Debbie. You know, we always talk about setbacks and setting buildings back from the street and everything. Are there any design guidelines, or are there any kind of guidelines you follow for setbacks from the beach, other than the required, you know, coastal control line and dune, all those different lines that are back there?
Scott, so right, we follow the setbacks. We have two overlays, the oceanfront overlay, and then east of that is the dune overlay, which have very different regulations. There's also state regulations regarding how far east a structure can go. In this instance, we felt that if you walk along the beach in that area, it's a very different character than what you see on Collins Avenue. So we did believe that the further east this particular tower on this site could be pushed, the better. We had looked at initially, we went through a bunch of different site plans and schematic plans for the tower. and the location has shifted several times. The first few that we looked at, we actually had it further east than it is currently. That was something that the state of Florida would not have approved. So I think where we've settled now is really the best that staff believes that the siting of the tower can be, because that critical skyline along Collins Avenue will be the least impacted. Whereas the skyline along the oceanfront is very different along Collins Avenue. You do see the taller buildings, and even some of the historic buildings, you see the taller portions of the buildings toward the east. You also see much less architectural character and architectural detailing on the eastern facades of even the historic buildings. And that was primarily done because a lot of these buildings were built during the 1930s, where cost was a significant issue. So most of the ornamentation of these buildings was fronting onto Collins Avenue. So if we're going to look at creating an intervention that's going to obscure portions of views, the eastern portion, in our opinion, is the most appropriate location for that. But that's a very good point. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just say, I again, it's still a concern, but I think when they do present, whenever we're back in City Hall, I would like to see some kind of rendering as what the average person's going to look like, going to see walking on the beach walk, going north and south, maybe from the ocean as well. And some sort of a not sort of a stick figure drawing, but something accurate that's going to show us what that's going to look like. And that's all I have, Jack.
Thank you, Scott. Nancy?
Yes?
It's your turn.
Okay. I met with the owner and Alfredo and talked about this before the owner had purchased all the buildings. So at that discussion, I never heard a word about a 250-story tower. I'm sure they were afraid to mention that to me at that time. And I am not afraid to criticize it at this time. First of all, the Raleigh is the star of the street. It doesn't need to be surrounded by towers and certainly shades. The tower has to be the biggest element there that's going to take away the shade that happens at the end of the day. To have the tower in back of the Raleigh is probably one of the worst situations I have seen in preservation. But I have a reason for this. The Raleigh has been a magnificent reminder of something in my life. I was Ken Zarelli, who owned the place at that time. Now this goes back to 1993. And of course, to be invited to have my campaign celebration when I was elected to the city commission, it was at the Raleigh. And it was the first time that we all had the chance to go inside and look at the beautiful, it was gorgeous inside and it was magnificent outside. So I am wondering how in the world we can justify anyone adding 250 feet to make a new tower behind the Raleigh. When you look at it from Collins Avenue, you're going to see this enormous, out of scale, out of character element in front of that wonderful hotel. Equally, the swimming pool of the Raleigh is one of the outstanding features of all time. No, there are none that are comparable. And to see it being squished in behind the Raleigh by this tower, I think is a big mistake. I'm wondering where the extra FAR is going from the Melvin Grossman buildings, the two smaller buildings. What happens to that FAR? Does it disappear? Or is that adding to this 250 feet? And lastly, I would like to see a shade study done of this tower at the time that the sun hits it from the west. Then we can really see what is going to happen to this magnificent building, plus the outlying structures. I don't know if I am upset now about chopping up the Melvin Grossman buildings. I didn't quite understand why all this has to be taken off the two other buildings. What's going in the place? I didn't understand what will take place behind the newly structured two buildings, the South Seas and the what is it? The other building that I just lost the name. Those are the things that I feel now. I don't know if Alex or whoever is going to respond to this, or if we can wait until the next time and discuss it. But I feel very strongly against this big tower. Want to build a tower that fits in, that doesn't scream out to the rest of the world, look at me, all the way out here on the beach side.
Jack, I'll hold off to the end, Jack.
No, please. Okay. We're not done yet.
Oh, no, I don't want to.
Okay. Have we left out anybody? Okay, and it's my turn. Okay.
Oh, wait, I haven't gone yet.
Oh, I'm sorry, Rick.
I think a lot of the comments from the board members reflect some of the things I wanted to say, certainly about the concerns about shade, the kind of enormous presence of this tower, which, although there's some very thorough presentation, very thorough set of drawings here, I wish it would be a little bit more forthcoming about what actually would be visible, because some of the views is street views as if that new tower just wouldn't be seen at all.
Right.
And I think that if the angles that were selected were a little bit more forthcoming about the actual visual impact that the tower would have, I think we could react to that as opposed to just being kind of left out in the dark. I'm curious to know two things, and maybe Debbie could help me. I heard that there was some work that was already been approved and ongoing at the rally, and I'm just curious what the extent of that work is, and how does that compare to the more obviously more thorough renovation that's being proposed here?
Sure, and the project that went for just the Raleigh, the 2015 approval, was a significant portion of the interior to be restored. So there was very little demolition proposed for the Raleigh Hotel building. The rooftop additions that are now proposed to be removed were to remain. Very little intervention besides window replacement and some minor exterior restoration work for the Raleigh Hotel itself. The new additions were for the eastern portion, and they were 2-story and 3-story kind of long bar cabana type buildings. So we had a 3-story cabana building that was approved along 18th Street at the northern side of the site, and then the side adjacent to the Richmond Hotel, I believe we ended up with a 2-story cabana. Bar building with food and beverage at the ground floor, and then guest units on the upper floors of those 2 buildings. So it was a much smaller scope of work that was proposed, but the basement area was also approved, so that there's that existing basement area for just that particular lot approved. It was a really good project, and there was some restoration of the lobby. We are thrilled now because we have the opportunity with such a massive increase in scope to really restore the Raleigh in a manner that we believe it should be restored as we believe it is one of the most world-renowned streamlined hotels. So.
Thank you for that. And I do remember last year's presentation from Mr. Schvo, and his genuine interest in restoring that building, and obviously that's really exciting to everybody here. Another question I have is about the South Seas and the Richmond. In looking through this huge set of drawings, I'm trying to find what will be the future use of what remains of those buildings. I know that there's some double height spaces being proposed, but I wonder, is there any use? Is there any real tangible use? And to that end, I wonder, could not some of the scope that's going into the new tower, remain in some of those lower buildings? It would be something that I would be happy to see, and maybe it helps mitigate some of that additional height while keeping more of a more active kind of overall site rather than just these kind of empty shells up on Collins. And then as to the the suggestion that this new tower has a light footprint, I also think that's I understand that the ground floor plan suggests a very kind of porous ground floor, but it's also a little bit misleading to suggest that sort of thing. And I understand there was an effort to preserve the DNA of the Dixon building in the new structure, but again, that's really hard to see. So I'm with Nancy, hoping to see that this tower could be brought down in scope. I'm concerned about the shade, the tremendous shade that there will be at the Raleigh pool, and also on the boardwalk, the public spaces, the boardwalk and the beach. But it is definitely exciting, and I commend the development team for this effort, and I believe that there will be a way forward.
Thank you very much, Rick. Very insightful. I appreciate it. Am I next? I think everyone has spoken. Okay. First, I'd like to thank Kobe and Mr. Schvo for bringing forth some of the most exciting ideas that I think we've ever seen in a project in Miami Beach. I think if all these things could come to fruition in a well-stated manner, I think we would have a great project. But there are some very, very strong concerns that I have about many of the things people have brought up, specifically Nancy and Rick and Scott. I've been involved for the past 45 years with many projects of this scale in the North, where there's lots of money involved and lots of review. And I think it is warranted to ask or to bring up this point, which no one else has brought up. People have brought up the idea of scale. They brought up the idea of sun and shadow and light. But the only way, in my humble opinion, that you can really experiment with this and make sure that it's done correctly is if you build a large-scale model showing the beach, showing the street surrounding it, the buildings surrounding it, and how your new tower will affect the three buildings you're talking about, the neighbors, and the street. You can use light and shadow on these models that give you a pretty good idea of what the sun angles would be at different times of the year, and if in fact the building as it is proposed would be harmful to pools proposed or to other people's light and air. I think those things are very important, and for the small amount of money relative to the big project that a model would cost, it would clarify a lot of these points to an awful lot of people, including the neighbors and other members of this board, to see exactly what's going on with light, shadow, etc., perhaps for a future meeting. That's the first thing. The second thing that I think is important is I don't think raising the lobby levels in these buildings is acceptable. If you're restoring something, you should restore what's there and keeping the character of what's there. I don't see any reason for double scale lobbies. They're very au courant, they're very modern idea concepts, and they create nice spaces. But here you're talking about hopefully properly restoring buildings, not creating new interior spaces. So I would be very much opposed to changing the interior of the spaces that buildings you're restoring. The next point is the garage. I'm very, very concerned. We have a new board member, Max, who's supposed to be on the board to talk about sustainability, water issues, etc. He did a very good job this morning on that issue, but I see no, I don't want to use the word guarantees, but no efforts on the owner or architect's or engineer's part to assure us that this huge basement they're talking about will not be disastrous during construction to possibly other buildings, neighbors, and the buildings on site. I assume that the owner has a bond in case something happens during the construction and something collapses, that the building could be rebuilt. But these are our most important iconic buildings in Miami Beach. The postcard view is important. Everything about them is important. And if something is being proposed that may threaten the structural stability of one or more of the buildings, there should be guarantees given to the city and to us that, and I'm sorry, will not do, that these buildings will be protected and their life will be guaranteed. We were very disturbed by what happened at the Versailles over the last many years, that it was not being protected while it was being worked on, and there were possible catastrophic results from that. And I'm not willing to go forward with anything where there's not some guarantee that the engineering study is 100% right on, and that if something happens, the owner is responsible to restore what was, as these are some of the most important buildings that we have. I'm concerned that the postcard view, as my friend Clotilde Luce calls it, which is the iconic view of Miami Beach from the west to the east, is preserved as well as possible. I think that the tower, although I understand the description of it, I understand the rationale for the windows and the projecting sections of it, try to use the language that the original architects used for the smaller buildings, but I think it's entirely too big and too tall. I can't put myself in the role of John Stewart, our former member, who always came up with an alternative. I'm not the architect, and I'm not really qualified with little information to offer you a suggestion as to how much smaller it should be. But I think it's a monstrous, monstrous structure. And just because you are able to do something doesn't mean that you have the blanket right to do it. I think the criticism can be traced back to the Secretary of Interior standards, and that's what we must use in our judgments. I think it is way overscaled and overwhelms the historic buildings that we are here to try to protect and preserve and restore. I don't know if that means it should be 150 feet, 100 feet. I can't sit here and give you an answer. I think it's all wound up in this model to show what can be seen from the street, what the light and air restrictions will be because of this tower, how it will affect the pool, how it will affect the whole property. We need to study that further. We have not done so. And I'm not sure that that we have enough information to really give a blanket approval to this. The next item is the beach club structure. I too agree with, I forget who said it, but I agree that I think it overwhelms the pool structure. I think it's much too big and it shouts, here am I, I'm the important thing here. The important thing, in my opinion, is the guard building. That's the iconic structure. Your beach club structure is trying to do the same thing as the tower. It's changing the focus of the entire property to the new structures. They're stating, I'm the things that are important here, not the historic buildings that we're trying to save. And I think that's a big, big mistake. And I'm not sure how to rectify it, but the tower is too big. The beach club building is of such a dramatic design that I think it takes away from the pool guard structure, basically. The next thing is the height of the new structure. Just because the zoning says you can do it doesn't mean you have to do it, or doesn't mean that we have to agree to it. And I think the Secretary of Standards, if you look at each one of them, you can use some of them to show that it is, although a very good building for Aventura, it is not necessarily a good building for this the most iconic spot in Miami Beach. And I can't stress enough, I have to agree with Nancy, that I'm so uncomfortable with the idea of this huge, monstrous, very good looking, but monstrous tower, what it will do without studies of light and air and shadow and sunlight to the buildings around it, to the beach, to everything else. The whole thing is being soft sold. And I think we need to see a good sized model where we can experiment and see what it does to the light, what it does to the shade, what it does to all sorts of things related to this gigantic project. I think I've said all I can say, but I hope the other board members will think about this. This is in my opinion, probably the most important site. And once it is altered in this way, there's no going back. I think we have to think about this long and hard. And I appreciate the work that Debbie has done. She's done great things to foster the proper restoration of the three buildings that are there. But I think we need to do more work with this tower. It really frightens me. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you, Jack. And board members, I did get a request from the applicant, Jack, to have a few minutes just to answer some of the board members' questions and respond a little bit.
Absolutely.
Okay, Alfredo?
Hello.
Thank you.
Okay. And thank you. First of all, I'd like to thank all the board members and the public for all the comments. We understand that we are in discussion, and this purposes means to start to have this dialogue on the project. I did want to clarify a couple things, and then it'll just take me a few minutes. And then if Jack, if you'd like, I do have Michael Shaw, who is on the call somewhere.
We would love to hear from him. He's fabulous. We love his garden. We love everything he's done. And we would certainly love to hear anything he has to say.
If you like, I could have him speak first, and then I'll just finish my points afterwards.
Any way you'd like to do it is fabulous.
Michael, there he is. Michael, you have the mic?
Yeah, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Fantastic. So, Mr. Chair, board members, firstly, I want to thank everybody for this time. I know it's probably not the best experience sitting and looking at this, as you said, what we believe is the most important development that Miami Beach has had for many years on a small computer screen or on a small cell phone. And I really hope that we can all be together in, your beautiful chambers and look at a model and look at sun studies and everything else. But I want to just address, we've heard a lot of comments, and I just want to give you guys kind of my perspective on the big picture. And I don't really want to get into the architectural details. We have a massive team of architects and consultants. There's probably 20 people from our side on this call that are taking notes of every single word that everybody said, and we'll address them individually. A year and a half ago, when we bought the Raleigh, with the existing plans, the idea was to convert it into residences and really keep the HPB approved plan. Subsequently, as Kobe told you all, we saw an amazing opportunity to do something that we think would be a great addition to Miami Beach, which is take the Richmond and the South Seas, combine them with the Raleigh, and create what we thought was a phenomenal master plan. The one thing that kind of set us apart and was the focus of this whole design exercise was really to highlight the historic buildings. And we've spent the last year, which is probably more than most developers spend in pre-design before they come before the board. We did that because we've came to Debbie and her team multiple times with multiple ideas, with multiple buildings. And I feel like we're conducting an orchestra, right? Everything has to work in unison. So of course, we have the location of the tower and the sun and the light and the Arch Bay and the Richmond, and we're taking into account every single one of these items in order to find the perfect design and the perfect location for the building and the perfect basement and the perfect driveway. And I don't want to comment on each one of these. Of course, we have tried in our ability to satisfy each one of these items in the best possible way without compromising the next item. But I think that the big design idea that Kobe and I had here was really the idea of purity. And I just want to address this because a lot of the things that were said today are very important, but we collectively, and we obviously welcome all the comments, have to make a decision. And I believe that the decision, at least what I wanted to do, and this is with a lot of conversation with staff, is restore the Raleigh, the South Seas, and the Richmond to their purest form. When we look at the postcards, we have postcards and views, and we have books and books and of drawings and pictures of these buildings throughout the different decades. And as we all know, these have a different life. There's always, the buildings aged in the sense they didn't just age, but different architects, different owners decided to add different elements to the building. When we met Debbie originally on this, she said, it would really be great if you removed the top floor of the Raleigh. As you guys would agree, that's a later addition, and it's obviously a big financial impact to remove the best floor of the Raleigh Hotel. And as part of this exercise, what we've done is we really tried to strip the Raleigh out for things that were not original as that top of the building. And we've done the same thing with the South Seas and the Richmond. That's why we've elected to remove the Grossman addition in order to really preserve this postcard view. And as the chair said, what is this going to look like from the streets? And again, with a lot of working with staff, we believe that the location of the building, and I'm not going to address the height yet, but just the location of the building. And by the way, just to correct something that Nancy said, I want to clarify, Nancy, the building is behind the Richmond, the South Seas. We are not building any building behind the Raleigh Hotel. We're keeping the Raleigh as it is. We're keeping the pool as it is. And we are actually removing one of the buildings that is approved on the Raleigh site. Remember, the board has approved 2 cabana buildings behind the pool. We actually are removing one. And of course, we can address the design of the beach club separately, and the architects will do that. So part of our goal was to create, really, when you walk on Collins Avenue, we wanted people to experience Miami Beach as it was when Dixon built these buildings, which to me are beautiful architectural buildings. And I want to just give you guys a little bit of a glimpse, and I'm sorry if I'm talking too much, but I think it's really important. You know, we talked about this in the previous meeting. You know, we're restoring one of the most important corners in Manhattan today, which is on the Crown building, really stripping down things that were added later. And this is what we're doing there. And for those of you who read the news, we've also purchased the Transamerica Pyramid in San Francisco exactly for that same reason. And we were awarded that deal because of the idea of restoring it, in that case, to the 1972 original architecture of William Pereira. So I am the first guy that will tell you we are here to bring these buildings to their glory. This is why what we've done here is really have a separation between old and new. When we met with you guys, when we met with staff, when we met with Daniel Serald and his team, everybody gave us one directive. Please make sure that when you look at these buildings, it's very clear what is historical and what is new. Don't try to imitate history. Don't try to make the building combined so they look like, so you don't really know where the old and the new start. And that is a directive that we gave our design team. You know, and that is something that I think was critical for us. And this is when we talk about where the building is located. As I believe Debbie said, we really did not want the building to be visible from Collins Avenue. With regards to the sun and the models, of course, we've done, you know, different sun studies and we've done all these things. Unfortunately, we can't do everything in a 12-minute meeting. And I'm sure that Kobe and team can share everything with you. And like any other renderings or any other information, if it's models or whatever it is that you need, we will obviously be happy to provide. And I think that is something that we're obviously very committed. But I just want everybody to understand our commitment to restoring this building. With regards to the tower itself, it's not 250 feet, it's 200 feet. And again, maybe the renderings don't show it properly. And I think Debbie will tell you, she's seen multiple designs of this building, and we've tried to minimize both the footprint and the effect on the site and keep it as far away from the historic building so it does not overwhelm these buildings. Because I, from all people, believe that the historic building should be pure and any new buildings should be separated from them. We also have designed it so there is the least amount of effect on the Raleigh pool, because as Nancy said, I think that pool is the most beautiful pool in America. We want that pool to be celebrated. That's why the landscaping celebrates the pool. There is no building on top of the pool. Nothing is overwhelming the pool. And when the building was pushed eastwards towards the ocean, we're actually opening up space near the pool. So the pool is celebrated from everywhere, including from our dear neighbors, the Lloyds. So as I said, we're trying to keep all these different orchestra pieces playing in harmony. So, and again, I'm happy to answer anybody's question on the board now or later. I spoke to a bunch of you guys separately. And as I said, we have a huge commitment to Miami Beach, a huge emotional commitment, a huge financial commitment. And really our commitment also, as I said to the mayor when I met him after we purchased these assets, our goal is to keep the Raleigh Hotel as a hotel so people in Miami Beach can enjoy the Raleigh, can enjoy the pool, can enjoy the entire site. And it's not, you know, and it's something that forever people can use. And that is what I hope that we will end up with when this whole project is approved. So if anybody has questions, I'm happy to answer.
Thank you very much for a most enlightening talk. It would greatly appreciate it, and I'm sure we will take you up on some of your offers. Debbie?
I believe Alfredo wanted to give a few comments. Is that accurate, or?
I will condense them because Michael has gone over most of them. I did want to point out to the entire board that obviously our first presentation of this very complex, very dynamic project was not intended to be over a Zoom call. And so we'll continue the outreach. We will reach out to every board member. We're more than happy to meet however we can, tour the site and address things like Michael said. We have shadow and sun studies that we're finalizing that will show not just the beach impact, but I think everyone will be very excited when they see how the Raleigh pool will benefit from this new proposed project, and it'll be seen and have more light and air going into the Raleigh pool than since it was built. But again, we will address all your comments. We will do a good comparison so you can understand what is permanent at the Raleigh, how we are improving, how they're changing it, and what has been improved on other parts of these three properties. So it's clear how what's being proposed, we think, is going to be the most beneficial for the project. And get all your support. So we'll go in one by one. I know it's a lot of items. I've taken a lot of notes, and we'll address them, I think, between now and when we go to an actual hearing.
Thank you, Alfredo. We look forward to working with you. I would love to join your next walkthrough with any other board members who haven't been recently. I went in 2015. I remember very distinctly we walked through at that point. So I look forward to looking at it from a different perspective the next time we can do this. Anybody else have any comments? Nobody? Okay, thank you.
I was just hoping that, I think it was Rick asked the question about the uses of the two smaller buildings. And Alfredo had that couple minutes of rebuttal time, if he could have just addressed that.
Sure, happy to do that. I had it, I just cut it off. The South Seas lobby, historic lobby, in our plan is going to be the lobby for the residential tower. The Richmond lobby was part of the restaurant and food operations going on in the project. So they're not just going to be empty lobbies, but the Richmond lobby is going to have F&B. So we can get into more detail about exactly how that operates and present that to you. And so it's clear to every board member what's happening in those two buildings. We did scale back the number of rooms overall because we had over 300 hotel rooms, and now we have about 86. So, does that?
Thanks.
Thank
you. Okay, are you done, Barry? Okay, thank you. Anyone else have any? Oh, sorry.
So we've got a bad echo, Kobe.
I would like to just add a couple of things which are very important, and like Nancy said, and we have all of your comments, so we will bring in the sun shadow study. Can you hear me, Nancy? Good. And so what it is that we really have is we have an opportunity that is to make the landscaping and the open spaces of the historic pool come back to life. And right now, when you go back there, whether it's the Richmond or the South Seas, there are 75-foot high structures. Those 75-foot high structures basically shade and shadow currently the pool and amenity area. As the sun goes along the southern axis, which is the Marseille, and thankfully the Marseille is set back closer to Collins Avenue, it will let the light back into the backyard of the Raleigh and the historic pool. That is the benefit. Now, the 200-foot building is based on how it is that we can set the building further away from the Marseille and the Raleigh, behind the South Seas and behind the Richmond. We are not building anything behind the Raleigh. And that is an opportunity to really create a light and air space into the historic spaces of the Richmond, the South Seas, and the Raleigh. And you will have the sun and light shadow studies for that. You will have the model. And we also have Christy Brush, who's also on the phone call with us, for the sustainability and resiliency analysis and study with our civil engineer for the subterranean spaces. And based on what Barry said, you know, the relationship of the stepping back building, the Raleigh is about 100 plus feet. It's about 150 feet to the top. We are stepping away back 250 feet. So we will share that on the model and the sun shadow that really lets the light and air into the historic pool, as has not been done since the 80s and 90s. It's an opportunity also to really think, and I'm very grateful for this meeting, you know, because under these conditions, I wanted to get input what people thought about bringing back the Dixon buildings and how it is that we can, like Kirk said, you know, bring in an inspiration or a designation and discuss what was done by Grossman, right? Because there's a precedence to it, not only here, but also on other buildings in the community. And I think that based on the direction from what Nancy is saying and what Jack, it is going to be interesting to move it forward, but we will do it together. And that's why I'm grateful for everybody giving their comments here today. And really, I think that in the next presentation, they will come in front of you. And if you allow us to walk you through the site, I think that kind of celebration of the space is going to come to light. And that's very, very important.
Thank you. We greatly, greatly look forward to meeting with you again. And you did under the circumstances, you did a bang up job today. And technology be damned, you were great. So thank you very much.
May I respond? I just want to say one thing. That
Your last word, Nancy.
Just for today. Now you're making me forget what I had to say. No, I wanted to hear someone, I think Kobe would do a good job to answer the question or to justify where did the 200 feet come from? Is that because it was allowed by that ordinance that we passed for other places in that area? What is the justification for 250 feet? It overshadows everything there. Why is it the beacon?
It's 200 feet, Nancy, not 250.
250, 200. It'll get to why? Justify the 200.
Yeah.
It doesn't
So what I'll do
relate to
is-
anything. Who's
What I'll-
answering? Kobe? Kobe's the one who, no?
Yeah, Kobe's answering.
Okay,
Can you hear me, Nancy?
I hear you.
Thank you. What I will do is I'll bring back, if you recall, on our first meeting, sitting at the lobby of the Shelbourne in the corner window, where the window allows us to look towards the Raleigh to the south. On the 11 by 17 pages that I had an analysis of showing the neighborhood context of the buildings to the north and to the south, and their context of being 200 feet and taller. Some obviously were taller, like the Satai, but even going back to the 100 Lincoln, or going back to the Ritz, or the SLSs, or even across the street from us, there are certain building heights and mass which are 200 feet and higher. And historically, the verticality of the neighboring building, whether it's the Shelbourne or it is the SLS or the National, they were skyscrapers trying to reach for the sky at being 150 to 200 feet with their cupolas. And that is where the height discussion came from. And there was a massing that I provided, which I'll provide again, that had the neighbors in context and had the neighboring buildings in context. And that's what I shared. I will make it part of the package that I submit to you in the next hearing. And also, when we sat down in that space, we looked at the buildings across the street and their heights and their footprints. For example, the footprint of the Raleigh is about 8,000 square feet as an L shape. The footprint of our building, which is skinnier and longer and fits right behind the Richmond and South Seas and away from the Raleigh, that footprint is the ratio that then dictated the height of the 200 feet and allowed us to push it further away. But again, I think that based on the comments from Kirk and Barry and Max and Rick, let me go through it and let me do that analysis in the model, because like Jack said, let us see it. Let us really see it together with you. It's like Debbie said, you know, we did a study, we had 2 towers, we had 1 tower, we had it further east, we had it further west. We are not here to do anything but to do an analysis together with you that we believe that the highest and best use and the highest and best master plan for the site is what it is that we are proposing. And at the same time, we're always amenable to listen and hear ideas and suggestions. Design is dynamic, it's not static. And the comments that you have put forth on the table here for us are very, very important for us. And that's why, as he said, we wrote each and every one. Kirk's comments are very important to me. Rick's comments are very, important to show. And when we have AJ said, we have 12 minutes, there's only so much I can do and show, right? I'm not in front of you showing you the boards and the models and the sun shadow in a video, which I was able to show to MDPL. I don't even have control of my presentation. This is an airplane that we're all passengers on, but I don't have an ability to really present to you. But hopefully, we'll find a way to do that on the next time, Nancy.
I appreciate your response. It gives me something more to think about.
Thank you both. Does anybody have any final comments? Board members? Going, gone. Okay. Debbie?
That's all that's on the agenda this morning. I do want to thank everyone from Communications Department who has made this possible. PJ, great job. Also, Jessica Gonzalez in our office, Jake and Victor, everyone who's helped put this together, because it is new for us. And I think you guys did a really great job. And that's all I have for today. We will keep you posted with regard to moving forward. June, July, August, etc. We don't have any additional information for you at this point, but we will keep everyone posted. Miss you guys.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you. Take care.
Do we have a motion to adjourn?
Move it.
Second.
Okay, we are adjourned. Take care, everyone. Be safe.
Be well.